Have you ever noticed how many of us walk through life with hesitation, second-guessing our choices, shrinking from challenges, or holding back from what we truly want to say or do? It's as if modern life has wired us for doubt, constantly bombarded by endless opinions, comparisons, and the pressure to conform. But what if there was a way to cut through all that noise, to stand firm in your convictions, and act with unshakable confidence, no matter what the world throws at you? 2,000 years ago, the Stoics had already figured it out. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's greatest Stoic philosophers, put it simply: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the essence of Stoicism, a philosophy not of passive acceptance, but of relentless courage and clarity in the face of chaos. This isn't just ancient wisdom, it's a survival toolkit for the modern world. Think about the last time you hesitated when you should have spoken up, or overthought a decision until the moment passed. Stoicism teaches us how to reclaim those lost opportunities, to act boldly even when fear whispers in our ear. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. 48 Stoic methods to cultivate unrelenting confidence and bold action. These aren't abstract ideas, they're battle-tested practices used by emperors, generals, and thinkers who faced far greater stakes than we ever will. From reframing obstacles as opportunities to mastering the art of disciplined focus, each method is a step toward becoming the kind of person who doesn't just weather storms but thrives in them. Imagine looking back a year from now and realizing you've become someone who no longer hesitates, who trusts their judgment, embraces challenges, and moves through the world with quiet assurance. That's the transformation Stoicism offers. Whether you're struggling with self-doubt, fear of failure, or the paralyzing weight of expectations, these 48 methods will give you the tools to rise above it all. So if you're ready to stop shrinking and start standing tall, let's begin. This isn't just about learning philosophy, it's about unlocking a version of yourself you've always known was possible. One of the most powerful tools Stoicism gives us is the ability to separate what's truly within our power from what isn't, the dichotomy of control. Picture this: you're at work, and after weeks of effort, you present a project only to hear harsh criticism from a colleague. Your stomach drops, your face flushes, and suddenly, all you can think about is their disapproval. But here's the question Epictetus, the former slave-turned-Stoic teacher, would ask: can you control their reaction? The answer, of course, is no. Their words, their opinions, even their moods, none of those belong to you. What does belong to you? Your response, your effort. Your decision to either crumble or learn. As Epictetus put it, some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, and aversion. In short, whatever is of our own doing. This isn't about ignoring reality or pretending criticism doesn't sting. It's about redirecting your energy where it actually matters. Think of it like sailing. You can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. The moment you stop wasting mental space on things you can't change, other people's choices, past mistakes, even the weather, you free up an enormous reserve of focus for what you can influence. Your actions, your attitude, your next move. So here's a challenge. Grab a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, list everything weighing on you right now: traffic, a boss's mood, a friend's silence. On the other, write what's truly yours to command: your preparation, your honesty, your willingness to try again. The goal isn't to magically erase frustration, but to see it clearly, to stop fighting battles that were never yours to win. Because when you do, something remarkable happens. the noise fades, and what's left is the quiet confidence of knowing exactly where to put your strength. Now let's talk about a Stoic practice so counterintuitive it might feel uncomfortable at first until you experience its power. The ancient Stoics called it Premeditatio Malorum, or the Premeditation of Evils. At its core, it's the deliberate practice of visualizing the worst-case scenario, not to dwell in fear, but to disarm it. Seneca, the great Roman philosopher, was a master of this. He'd regularly ask himself, what if I lost my wealth? What if my reputation was shattered? What if my plans crumbled? Not because he expected disaster, but because he knew something profound. Anticipation softens the blow. Think of it like a fire drill. When you hear the alarm in an office building, nobody panics because they've practiced the steps 100 times. That's what negative visualization does for your mind. By mentally rehearsing setbacks before they happen, you strip them of their surprise and emotional charge. Imagine you're about to give a big presentation. Instead of just hoping it goes well, a Stoic would take 5 minutes to ask, what if my slides fail? What if the audience looks bored? Then, and this is key, they'd plan their response. I'll keep calm and speak from memory. I'll engage them with a question. Suddenly, the fear loses its fangs because you've already faced it in your mind and know exactly how you'll handle it. This isn't pessimism, it's preparedness. The Stoics weren't teaching us to expect the worst, they were showing us how to neutralize it. Take public speaking again. Most people's anxiety comes from the unknown. What if I freeze? But when you've already visualized freezing and decided you'll pause, take a breath and continue, the disaster becomes just another manageable moment. That's the magic of this practice. It turns the monsters under the bed into problems with solutions. Here's how to try it today. Pick one thing you're nervous about, a difficult conversation, a career risk, even a social event. Close your eyes and vividly imagine the worst possible outcome. Feel the discomfort, then ask, how would I respond with strength? Maybe you'd remind yourself that embarrassment fades, or that rejection isn't fatal. Maybe you'd find humor in the situation. The goal isn't to dwell on fear, but to rehearse your resilience, because when you've already stood firm in your imagination, doing it in reality becomes second nature. Seneca wrote, "The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." That's the gift of Premeditatio Malorum. It doesn't just reduce fear, it builds an unshakable confidence that no matter what happens, you've already walked through the fire and know the way out. And once you've tasted that kind of mental freedom, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. There's a radical idea at the heart of Stoicism that might change how you see every setback, every detour, every so-called failure in your life. The Stoics called it Amor Fati, a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. Centuries later, the philosopher Nietzsche borrowed it, calling it his formula for greatness. But what does it really mean to love your fate, especially when life hands you disappointment, rejection, or plain bad luck? Imagine you're passed over for a promotion you worked hard for. Your first reaction might be frustration, even resentment, but Amor Fati asks something different. What if this rejection is secretly a gift? What if it's steering you towards something better, a path you couldn't see until now? Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome through wars and plagues, put it like this: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's the essence of Amor Fati. It's not about pretending hardships don't hurt. It's about trusting that even the worst moments are shaping you, teaching you, redirecting you towards something you couldn't have planned. Think of a river hitting a rock. It doesn't rage against the obstacle. It flows around it, and in doing so, carves a new path that's often more beautiful than the original. Here's how to practice this today. Take one recent setback, a missed opportunity, a mistake, even a personal loss. Now, write down 3 ways it might have helped you. Maybe that job rejection freed you to explore a passion project. Maybe that argument revealed a boundary you needed to set. This isn't toxic positivity, it's strategic reframing. The Stoics knew that resilience isn't just enduring hardship, it's mining it for gold. Consider the story of Thomas Edison. When his lab burned down, destroying years of work, he didn't collapse in despair. He told reporters, "There's value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Now we can start fresh." That's Amor Fati in action, seeing destruction as a chance to rebuild smarter. Or take modern examples, athletes who turn injuries into opportunities to study strategy, or entrepreneurs whose failed ventures teach them the exact skills they need for future success. The real power of this practice, it transforms you from a victim of circumstances to an alchemist of them. When you start looking for the hidden gifts in setbacks, you stop fearing them. You begin to trust that no matter what happens, you'll find a way forward, not in spite of the obstacle, but because of it. That's the unshakable confidence the Stoics promised. Not a life without storms, but the certainty that every storm has a purpose. So the next time life veers off script, ask yourself, how can I love this twist in my story? The answer might just reveal your next great adventure. Death is the one guest we're all guaranteed to meet, yet most of us live as if we've been promised forever. The Stoics had a name for this powerful truth, Memento Mori, Latin for remember you must die. Far from being morbid, this practice was designed to sharpen focus, strip away trivial distractions, and ignite urgency in how we spend our days. Seneca, who wrote extensively about time's fleeting nature, put it bluntly, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." Think about that for a second. We fear rejection as if it'll last forever, yet we postpone our dreams as if we have limitless time. Modern life magnifies this paradox. We drown in distractions, endless scrolling, trivial debates, busy work masquerading as productivity, while the things that truly matter get shelved for a hypothetical someday. But here's the question the Stoics would ask. What if someday never comes? Imagine standing at the end of your life, looking back. Would you regret the hours lost to mindless entertainment, or the courage you didn't muster to start that project, mend that relationship, or take that leap? This isn't about fear, it's about clarity. The Stoics used Memento Mori not to paralyze but to prioritize. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. He wasn't dwelling on death, he was demanding action. Contrast that with today's culture of procrastination, where we delay meaningful work until conditions are perfect. A myth that keeps us stuck in waiting rooms of our own making. Here's the irony, acknowledging life's brevity doesn't diminish joy, it amplifies it. When you stop postponing what matters, every day becomes vivid with purpose. Take the artist who paints daily, not because she's guaranteed fame, but because creating feels alive. Or the father who puts down his phone to play with his kids, knowing these moments won't return. Memento Mori turns later into now. So here's your challenge today. Pick one thing you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a difficult conversation, a creative pursuit, or a health goal. Before you begin, pause and say aloud, "I am mortal. This moment is all I'm guaranteed." Then act, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, now, because the Stoics understood a truth we often forget. Death isn't just an end. It's the compass that points us toward a life fully lived. We live in a world engineered for comfort, heated seats, instant meals, apps that deliver anything to our doorsteps with a tap. But what if this constant cushioning is secretly weakening us? The Stoics had a counterintuitive solution, voluntary discomfort. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, put it plainly: how can a person develop courage if they only seek comfort? How can they learn self-control if they never say no to their desires? This wasn't about masochism, it was about immunization. Just as exposing the body to small stresses makes it stronger, deliberately choosing discomfort fortifies the mind. Think of it like a mental vaccine. When you voluntarily face minor hardships, cold showers, skipping a meal, walking instead of driving, you're not just enduring discomfort. You're proving to yourself that you can, and that proof becomes a shield when life inevitably throws real challenges your way. Modern science backs this up. Studies on cold exposure show it reduces stress responses over time, while intermittent fasting has been linked to increased mental clarity. The Stoics were onto something profound. Comfort is a trap when it becomes constant. Here's the twist: voluntary discomfort isn't about deprivation, it's about freedom. When you're no longer ruled by the need for perfect conditions, you gain agency. Imagine two people stuck in a delayed flight. One bristles at the cramped seat, the lack of Wi-Fi, the stale air. The other, who's practiced sitting in discomfort, pulls out a book or strikes up a conversation. Who's truly freer? The Stoics knew that resilience isn't just for crises. It's the daily practice of choosing what others avoid. So let's make this practical. Pick one comfort to surrender this week. It could be as simple as turning off notifications for an hour, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, or swapping your morning coffee for water. Notice the urge to quit, then stay. That moment of tension is where confidence is forged, because when you willingly step into discomfort, you rewrite the most dangerous story of all, the one that says you need ease to function. The truth: you're far more capable than your comforts have led you to believe. Marcus Aurelius had a secret weapon against stress, one he used while ruling an empire, leading armies, and facing betrayals. He called it the view from above, a mental exercise where you zoom out, way out, until your problems shrink into perspective. Picture this: you're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting, gripping the wheel in frustration. Now imagine rising above your car, seeing the snaking line of vehicles from 100 feet up. Keep going. See your city as a grid, your country as a shape on a globe, the earth itself as a pale blue dot in the cosmos. Suddenly, that traffic jam isn't a crisis, it's a speck in space and time. That's the Stoic shift. This isn't about dismissing your struggles, it's about seeing them in their true proportion. Think of a time you spilled coffee on your shirt before a presentation. In the moment, it felt catastrophic, but a week later, barely a memory. The view from above accelerates that realization. Marcus wrote in his Meditations, "Think of the universal substance, of which you have a very small portion, and of universal time, of which a short and indivisible interval has been assigned to you." Translation: you and your worries are part of something vast. That argument with your partner, that missed deadline, how much will they matter in a year? A decade? The Stoics weren't minimizing pain, they were maximizing clarity. Try this today. Pick one stressor gnawing at you. Maybe it's a criticism from a coworker or anxiety about an upcoming event. Close your eyes and visualize pulling back, first seeing your room from the ceiling, then your neighborhood from the sky, your continent from orbit. Notice what happens. The details blur, the urgency fades. What's left isn't the problem itself, but your relationship to it. Astronauts who have seen Earth from space often describe the overview effect, a profound shift in priorities, where borders and conflicts seem trivial against the shared fragility of our planet. The Stoic version is the same but portable. You don't need a rocket to gain cosmic perspective. Here's the magic of this practice. It doesn't just reduce stress, it reveals what truly deserves your energy. That rude comment online from space, it's silence, the promotion you didn't get, one thread in a vast tapestry, but zoom back in what does stand out. The people you love, the work that excites you, the moments of kindness, the view from above isn't an escape, it's a filter for what matters. So next time you're drowning in the details, remember Marcus's words, keep before your eyes the rapidity with which all things pass away. The traffic, the spilled coffee, even the empires all fleeting. What remains is how you choose to meet them, and that's where your power has always been. Marcus Aurelius never intended his journal to become one of history's most influential books. He wrote it for himself. Every night, the emperor would sit with ink and parchment, reflecting on his day with ruthless honesty. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I meet today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. He wrote not to complain, but to prepare. This wasn't diary keeping, it was mental training. While modern gratitude journals focus on positive moments, and there's value in that, Stoic journaling goes deeper. It's about dissecting your reactions, exposing rationalizations, and holding yourself accountable. Aurelius didn't just list what went well, he asked, what weakness did I indulge today? Where did I fail to act with virtue? Consider the difference between writing, I'm grateful for my job, and why did I resent my co-worker's success instead of learning from it? Both have merit, but the latter builds emotional muscle. Modern research supports this. Studies show reflective journaling, not just positive affirmations, boosts emotional intelligence and problem solving. The Stoics knew this intuitively. Their journals were mirrors, not highlight reels. Epictetus, who taught that journaling was essential for self-mastery, urged his students to confront their progress nightly. If you didn't write it down, don't claim you've practiced it. Here's how to adopt this practice today. Grab any notebook, no fancy prompts needed, and answer 3 Stoic questions each evening. First, what challenged me today and how did I respond? Not what went wrong, but how did I meet it? Second, where did I act against my values? No shame, just observation, like a coach reviewing game tape. Third, what one thing will I do differently tomorrow? Keep it concrete. Maybe you'll pause before reacting to criticism, or speak up in a meeting instead of staying silent. The key is specificity. Aurelius didn't write, be better, he dissected moments. When you lose your temper, you've lost the battle, not with others, but with yourself. Modern life bombards us with distractions, making reflection feel like a luxury. But the Stoics treated it as non-negotiable as eating. Think of your mind as a garden. Journaling is the daily weeding. Skip it and rationalizations take root. I had to yell, they weren't listening. I'll start exercising next month. Left unchecked, these stories harden into excuses. Writing breaks their spell. Try this tonight. Set a 5-minute timer. Write one sentence acknowledging a struggle, not to dwell, but to disarm it. I felt small when my idea was dismissed, so I stayed quiet the rest of the meeting. Then reframe it as fuel. Next time I'll advocate for my perspective calmly. That's Stoic journaling in action, not just recording life, but revising your role in it. As Marcus wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Your journal is where you choose the hue. Traffic jams have a special way of revealing who we really are. One person sits fuming, pounding the steering wheel, muttering about wasted time. Another turns up the music, calls a friend, or simply watches the world go by. Same situation, wildly different experiences. Why? Because as Epictetus taught 2 millennia ago, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. That's the heart of objective judgment, the realization that events themselves are neutral. It's our interpretations that color them, with frustration, fear, or even curiosity. Think about the last time you felt wronged. Maybe someone cut you off in traffic or ignored your message. The raw facts are simple. A car changed lanes. A text went unanswered, but the stories we tell ourselves, they disrespected me, they're deliberately ignoring me, those are the sparks that ignite anger or anxiety. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming philosophy's most famous teacher, knew this intimately. His entire philosophy rests on one liberating truth. While we can't always control what happens, we can control what it means to us. Here's how to put this into practice. Next time you're stuck in traffic, pause and dissect the moment. The objective reality: your car isn't moving, that's it. Everything else, "I'll be late, this is ruining my day," is a layer you've added. Now try stripping it back. What if this delay is a chance to listen to an audiobook you've been meaning to finish? To brainstorm ideas, to practice patience, the Stoics called this stepping back from impressions, creating space between what is and what we decide it means. Modern psychology echoes this ancient wisdom. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, a gold standard treatment for anxiety, teaches the same skill, separating facts from interpretations. A boss's terse email isn't proof you're failing, it's just words on a screen until you assign them meaning. The power of objective judgment isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about choosing them deliberately. So here's your challenge. Pick one annoyance from this week, a long line, a rude comment, a cancelled plan. Write down the bare facts, then list 3 possible interpretations. For example, fact: the barista got my order wrong. Interpretation 1, they don't care. Interpretation 2, they're overwhelmed with orders. Interpretation 3, this gives me a chance to try something new. Notice how each lens changes how you feel. That's the Stoic superpower, realizing you hold the brush that paints your experience. Epictetus didn't just teach this, he lived it. When Emperor Domitian exiled him along with other philosophers, he didn't rage against the injustice. He simply set up a school in Greece, shaping minds that would outlast empires. His secret, knowing that exile wasn't a tragedy unless he judged it as one. The same applies to your daily irritations. The traffic jam isn't the problem. The story you tell yourself about it is. Change the story and you change everything. The greatest athletes in the world understand a secret that most spectators miss. It's never really about the scoreboard. Think about a basketball player at the free throw line with seconds left in the game. The crowd's roaring, the pressure's crushing, but what separates champions from the rest isn't whether the ball goes in. It's their total focus on the process, the bend of their knees, the flick of their wrist, the follow-through. That's the Stoic discipline of action in its purest form, the unwavering commitment to doing your part regardless of the outcome. Seneca nailed it when he said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." But here's what most people misinterpret: preparation isn't just about skill. It's about training your mind to care more about showing up fully than about what happens after you do. Consider how this plays out beyond sports. Imagine you're pitching a risky idea at work, one that could revolutionize your department or get laughed out of the room. The temptation is to obsess over the result. Will they like it? Will I get credit? But Stoicism flips the script. It asks, have I researched thoroughly? Have I communicated clearly? Those are the only factors truly within your control. The rest, your boss's mood, office politics, even market conditions, isn't yours to command. This isn't passivity, it's precision. When you pour your energy into the quality of your effort rather than the unpredictability of results, something shifts. Fear of failure loses its grip because you've already won by acting with integrity. History's boldest innovators operated this way. Thomas Edison didn't judge his progress by successful light bulbs. He measured it by experiments conducted, hypotheses tested. J.K. Rowling didn't write Harry Potter thinking this will sell millions. She focused on crafting one good sentence after another, even while facing rejection after rejection. That's the discipline of action, divorcing your self-worth from external validation and tethering it instead to the dignity of your effort. As Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, the wise man regards the reason for all his actions but not the results. So how do you cultivate this mindset when everything in modern culture screams, results matter most? Start small. Next time you send an important email, pause before hitting send. Ask yourself, have I been clear and respectful? Then release it without refreshing your inbox every 30 seconds for a reply. Or take fitness. Instead of fixating on the scale, focus on whether you showed up for your workout with full effort. The magic happens when you realize that controlling the controllable isn't limiting, it's liberating. You're no longer at the mercy of whims and what-ifs. Here's your challenge for the week. Pick one area where you've been overly attached to outcomes, a creative project, a relationship, a financial goal. Now make a 2-column list. On the left, write every aspect you can't control: other people's opinions, market trends, sheer luck. On the right, list what you can: your preparation, your attitude, your willingness to adapt. Then, and this is crucial, cross out the left column, literally, physically. Those aren't your concerns anymore. Your job is to pour everything into the right side and let the chips fall where they may. This is where Stoicism becomes more than philosophy. It becomes fuel for fearless action. When you stop measuring success by unpredictable outcomes and start measuring it by the integrity of your effort, you unlock a rare kind of confidence. Not the brash certainty that you'll always win, but the quiet knowledge that no matter what happens, you'll have no regrets about how you played the game. And that's how ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things, not by guaranteeing results, but by guaranteeing their commitment to the process. The scoreboard will always be fickle. Your effort, that's yours forever. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, would deliberately wear worn-out clothes, sleep on the floor, and eat nothing but stale bread for days. This wasn't some eccentric quirk. It was a calculated exercise in practicing poverty. At first glance, it seems contradictory. A millionaire philosopher choosing hardship when he could afford every indulgence. But Seneca knew something most of us forget. Luxury isn't just about what you own, it's what owns you. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition I feared?'" That question cuts to the heart of Stoic philosophy. It's not about rejecting comfort, but about proving to yourself that you don't need it to be okay. Think about how modern life wires us for dependency. We panic when our phone battery dips below 20% or when the Wi-Fi lags. We've outsourced so much of our resilience to conveniences that the slightest disruption feels like an emergency. Now imagine Seneca's experiment in today's terms. Could you go a weekend without checking social media, a week without takeout, a month without buying anything but essentials? The goal isn't to live in austerity forever, but to break the illusion that these comforts are necessities. Because once you do, you gain something priceless, the certainty that you can thrive with less. This philosophy mirrors modern minimalism, but with a crucial difference. While minimalists often focus on decluttering for peace of mind, Stoic poverty practice is about mental immunization. It's like a fire drill for your survival instincts. Take tech billionaires who still drive old cars or wear the same outfit daily. They're not being cheap, they're ensuring their happiness isn't tied to external luxuries. Or consider athletes who train in harsh conditions. They know that by acclimating to discomfort, they'll outperform when it counts. Here's how to try this today. Pick one luxury you rely on: your morning latte, air conditioning, ride sharing, and let it go for a set period. Notice what happens. At first, you'll crave it. Then something shifts, you adapt. You discover coffee brewed at home isn't so bad, or that walking in the heat makes you appreciate shade more deeply. That's the hidden gift of Seneca's experiment. Deprivation doesn't diminish joy, it refines it. When you voluntarily step away from excess, you reset your baseline for what's enough. The Stoics weren't anti-wealth, they were anti-attachment. Seneca himself advised, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." That's why practicing poverty works. It's not about what you give up, it's about what you gain. The unshakable knowledge that your confidence, your creativity, your very sense of self aren't housed in things. They live in the one place no one can take from you, your mind. So ask yourself, what's one comfort you're ready to test your independence from? The answer might just reveal how much richer you are than you think. In a world where every thought gets tweeted, every meal gets photographed, and every minor inconvenience becomes a public rant, the Stoics practiced something radical: restraint. Not the silence of shyness, but the deliberate choice to speak only when words could improve upon the quiet. Epictetus, the philosopher who began life as a slave, put it bluntly: "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That simple anatomy lesson holds a profound truth. Most of us are drowning in our own noise, mistaking constant expression for authenticity and volume for value. Consider how differently we communicate today compared to the Stoics' era. Ancient philosophers measured their words like precious coins, knowing each one carried weight. Now, social media platforms reward hot takes and knee-jerk reactions. Algorithms favor the loudest, not the wisest. There's a reason Marcus Aurelius warned himself in his journal. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? He wasn't advocating muteness. He was training himself to resist the addiction to unnecessary speech, the kind that drains energy, creates drama, or dilutes truth. This isn't about suppressing your voice, it's about honoring it. Think of the last time someone interrupted you mid-sentence. Now recall a conversation where the other person listened so deeply you felt truly heard. That's the Stoic difference. When Epictetus advised, first learn the meaning of what you say and then speak, he wasn't just teaching rhetoric, he was offering a filter for meaningful connection. The irony: in an age of non-stop sharing, we've never felt more disconnected. Here's a challenge that might unsettle your modern habits. Try a day of intentional silence. Not monastic vow of silence, but strategic pauses. Before speaking, ask, will this add value? Is it kind? Is it true? You'll quickly notice how much of our chatter is automatic, filling air, seeking validation, or masking discomfort. The magic happens when you stop reflexively filling space. You start hearing the subtleties in others' voices. You notice the thoughts that only surface when you're not talking over them. And when you do speak, your words carry gravity. History's most respected leaders understood this power. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, one of the most quoted speeches in history, lasted barely 2 minutes. The Stoics would have nodded in approval. They knew that wisdom isn't measured in word count, but in impact. So next time you're about to vent online or jump into a debate, channel Epictetus. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid. Sometimes the boldest action isn't adding your voice to the noise, it's letting the silence speak for you. Marcus Aurelius faced invasions, betrayals, and plagues, yet he left us not complaints, but a masterpiece of resilience. His secret, a mental flip so powerful it transforms stumbling blocks into stepping stones. The impediment to action advances action, he wrote. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's Stoic inversion in action, taking the very thing that seems to block your path and using it as the path itself. Consider the story of a tech startup that crashed spectacularly after its app failed to gain traction. The founder could have seen this as proof he wasn't cut out for entrepreneurship. Instead, he applied Aurelius' inversion. That failed app, it gave him two priceless gifts: a list of exactly what users didn't want, and the humility to listen more closely next time. His next venture, built on those hard-won lessons, sold for millions. The obstacle wasn't the end of his journey, it was the curriculum. Here's how to practice this today. Take your biggest current hurdle, a rejected proposal, a strained relationship, even a financial setback. Now ask, how could this actually be helping me? Maybe that rejection is forcing you to refine your ideas until they're undeniable. Maybe that conflict is revealing where you need stronger boundaries. The Stoics didn't believe in meaningless suffering. They believed every challenge carries coded instructions for growth. Think of a blacksmith tempering steel. The metal doesn't become stronger despite the hammer blows. It becomes stronger because of them. That's inversion. A musician who loses hearing doesn't give up like Beethoven. They compose by feeling vibrations. A writer whose manuscript is rejected doesn't quit. They revise until the work is bulletproof. The common thread: they stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" Try this mental reframe the next time you hit resistance. Stuck in traffic, that's unexpected time to brainstorm or unwind. Facing criticism, that's free feedback highlighting blind spots. Even physical pain can be inverted. Bodybuilders learn to interpret muscle burn not as suffering, but as signals of growth. The obstacle doesn't change, your relationship to it does. Aurelius didn't just preach this, he lived it. When Rome was struck by plague, he didn't hide in his palace. He sold his own treasures to fund hospitals. When his most trusted general rebelled, he responded not with vengeance, but by putting the man's organizational skills to work rebuilding cities. That's the alchemy of inversion, taking what looks like poison and finding the medicine hidden inside. Your turn. Grab paper and write down one current struggle. Below it, complete this sentence: "This is secretly helping me bite." The answer might not come instantly, but the act of searching rewires your brain. Soon you'll stop seeing obstacles and start seeing opportunities wearing disguises, because the barrier isn't in your path, it is the path, and that changes everything. The Stoics didn't just teach principles, they pointed to a living ideal. The sage, the fully wise person who embodies virtue in every thought and action. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, called this living in agreement with nature, where reason and character align so perfectly that fear, envy, and irrational desires simply dissolve. Picture someone who faces chaos with calm, injustice with justice, and loss without lament, not because they're unfeeling, but because they've mastered the art of focusing only on what they can control. This wasn't some unattainable myth. The Stoics believed the sage was a mirror held up to show us our potential. Now you might think, that sounds impossible, no one's that perfect. And you'd be right. Even the Stoics admitted the true sage was rarer than a phoenix. But here's the crucial twist: the value isn't in achieving perfection. It's in the pursuit. The sage is a compass, not a destination. Think of modern mentors: the coach who stays composed when the team is losing, the teacher who responds to disrespect with patience, the entrepreneur who treats failure as data. They're not Stoic sages, but they're walking proofs of the philosophy's power when applied in fragments. Zeno put it bluntly: virtue is the only good. Not wealth, not fame, not even health, just the integrity of your choices. That's why Stoicism focuses less on what the sage has and more on how they act. Take a nurse working a double shift in the ER. exhausted, underpaid, surrounded by suffering, yet they choose kindness, precision, and presence. They're not immune to stress, but they've trained themselves to act despite it. That's the sage's shadow, ordinary people making extraordinary choices under pressure. So who in your life models these traits? Maybe it's a grandparent who endured hardship without bitterness, or a colleague who gives critical feedback with respect, not ego. Perhaps it's a public figure like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison only to emerge advocating reconciliation, not revenge. These aren't flawless beings, they're humans who have learned to channel their struggles into strength. The sage reminds us that wisdom isn't about never falling, it's about how you rise each time. Here's an exercise to bring this home. List 3 people, real or historical, who have inspired you with their resilience or integrity. Next to each name, write one specific trait they embody: patience in adversity, courage in uncertainty, humility in success. Now, circle one trait you could practice this week. Not to become a sage overnight, but to take one step closer to their example. Because the real magic of Stoicism isn't in worshipping ideals, it's in weaving them into the fabric of your daily life, stitch by deliberate stitch. There's a split-second moment faster than a heartbeat where every emotion hands you a choice. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A coworker takes credit for your idea. Your child throws a tantrum in the grocery store. In that flash of heat before you react, there's a sliver of space Epictetus called the gap between stimulus and response. And here's the life-changing truth. That gap is where your power lies. The Stoic teacher put it plainly: choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. At first glance, it sounds like denial, but look closer. It's actually about interception. Picture anger like a wildfire. In its earliest stages, it's just a spark easily smothered with a breath. But once it spreads, it takes bulldozers to contain. The Stoics weren't telling you to never feel anger. They were teaching you to catch it before it becomes uncontrollable. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies show that the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, triggers emotional reactions in milliseconds, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought, takes a full 6 to 8 seconds to engage. That's why counting to 10 works. It's not childish, it's biological. You're literally waiting for your smarter self to show up. Consider how this plays out in real life. A manager snaps at you in a meeting. Your face flushes, your pulse spikes, classic fight or flight. But instead of firing back or shrinking, you pause. In that silence, you might realize, this isn't about me. He's under pressure from his boss, or my calm response will speak louder than any comeback. The situation hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. That's the Stoic pause in action. It's not about suppressing emotions, it's about elevating them from reactions to responses. Here's how to train this muscle. Start small, with inconveniences, not crises. When your coffee spills, resist the instinct to curse. When your phone drops, notice the urge to groan, then let it pass. Each time you do, you're reinforcing a neural pathway. Over time, those seconds of pause become automatic, creating space even in high-stakes moments. The ancient Stoics had a name for this trained calm. Apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from destructive passions. Try this today. Pick one interaction where you'd normally react on autopilot: a snippy email, a long line at the bank. Before responding, physically step back, take 3 breaths, ask, what would my best self do here? You'll often find the answer isn't dramatic, it's simple. It's kind, and it's almost always more powerful than the heat of the moment version. Because when you master the pause, you stop being a puppet to circumstance. The strings are still there, but now you hold them. There's a dangerous illusion many of us chase without realizing it. the belief that being liked is the same as being respected. The Stoics saw through this centuries ago. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming philosophy's most influential teacher, put it bluntly: if anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, don't make excuses. Reply, he must not know my other faults, or he wouldn't have mentioned only these. At first, that sounds like self-deprecation, but look deeper. It's a masterclass in disentangling your worth from others' opinions. The Stoics didn't dismiss reputation entirely. They just saw it as a side effect of character, never the goal. Think about the last time you watered down your truth to avoid conflict. Maybe you laughed at an offensive joke to fit in, or stayed silent when a colleague took credit for your work. In the moment, it feels like social survival. But each time you trade integrity for approval, you hand over a piece of yourself. Contrast that with the Stoic approach. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the Roman Empire at its peak, wrote in his private journal, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That's the paradox of people-pleasing. We sacrifice the respect we could have for ourselves to chase fleeting validation from others. Here's the radical shift Stoicism offers. Reputation is like smoke. It shifts with the wind, impossible to grasp. Character, though, that's fireproof. Consider two co-workers, one who constantly adapts to please the boss, the other who speaks candidly even when it's uncomfortable. Who do you trust more? Who would you follow in a crisis? History's most admired figures, from Socrates refusing to flee his unjust execution to Rosa Parks staying seated, weren't obsessed with how they were perceived. They were rooted in something deeper, the quiet certainty that some lines must not be crossed, no matter the cost. This isn't about becoming indifferent to others. The Stoics valued community and connection deeply, but they drew a critical distinction. Adjusting your behavior to be kind is wisdom. Contorting your values to be liked is weakness. Epictetus framed it as a simple equation. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That's the litmus test. Can you bear temporary disapproval for lasting self-respect? Try this reflection today. Recall a moment you prioritized reputation over values. Maybe you exaggerated achievements on a resume or nodded along to gossip. Now, rewrite that scene with Stoic courage. How would you act if you truly believed, as Marcus did, that the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury? The gap between those two versions isn't just a lesson, it's a roadmap. Because when you stop outsourcing your self-worth to applause meters, you discover something extraordinary: the freedom of being whole, even when others don't clap. The first light of dawn was sacred to Marcus Aurelius. He'd rise before the sun and whisper to himself, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." That simple ritual wasn't just poetry, it was mental armor. While most of us wake up reaching for phones, drowning in notifications before our feet hit the floor, the Stoics treated mornings like a forge, a quiet space to temper their minds before the world's chaos began. Their secret, a three-part ritual that transformed ordinary routines into acts of defiance against distraction and doubt. Start with stillness. Before checking emails or scrolling news, sit upright. No need for elaborate poses, and close your eyes. Picture the day ahead like a sculptor examining raw marble. Where will challenges emerge? A tense meeting, a creative block. Now, here's the Stoic twist. Don't just anticipate obstacles, embrace them. Visualize yourself navigating each with calm precision. Marcus called this taking the measure of your soul. Modern science backs it up. Studies show morning visualization primes the brain for resilience, activating the same neural pathways as physical practice. Imagine a surgeon mentally rehearsing a procedure or an athlete running plays in their mind. That's the power of pre-lived experience. Next, set intentions, not goals. Goals fixate on outcomes, close three sails, while intentions root you in character. Listen deeply to each client. Epictetus advised, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. This shifts your focus from external results to internal mastery. Think of a teacher entering a rowdy classroom. If their intention is control these kids, frustration follows. But if it's meet their energy with patience, the dynamic changes. Intentions are compasses, not destination markers. Now, the most counterintuitive step, practice poverty. Not literal deprivation, but a moment of voluntary discomfort. Skip the sugar in your coffee. Take a cold splash to your face. Sit on the floor instead of a cushioned chair. Why? Seneca explained it best. Set aside days where you withdraw from comforts to remember how little you need to be happy. This isn't about suffering, it's about inoculation. When your morning includes minor resistance, traffic jams, or missed lunches later feel trivial, Navy SEAL used this principle in Hell Week. By embracing cold, wet, and exhaustion early, they rewire their tolerance for adversity. Your challenge tomorrow, carve out 20 minutes, just 20, to try this triad. Wake before distractions do. Sit. Visualize one tough moment awaiting you, then see yourself handling it with stoic calm. Choose one intention that aligns with your values, not just your tasks, and introduce one small discomfort, a colder shower, a slower breakfast without screens. Notice what happens when you enter the day as a sculptor of circumstance rather than its clay. Marcus didn't journal at night by accident. He knew mornings set the tone for everything. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, he wrote. So here's the question, what hue will yours take today? The answer starts before sunrise. As daylight fades and the world quiets, Seneca would light a single lamp and turn inward, not to tally accomplishments, but to conduct what he called his daily audit of the soul. This wasn't some vague reflection. It was a structured, almost surgical examination of where he'd strayed from virtue and how he could realign. Picture a general reviewing battle maps after a campaign, marking where defenses faltered and where tactics succeeded. That's the precision Seneca brought to his evenings. In one of his letters, he described the practice. The spirit ought to be called to account every day. This was the custom of Sextius, who would ask himself at day's end, what ailment of yours have you cured today? What vice have you resisted? Modern productivity culture has twisted this idea into shallow nightly rituals, gratitude lists, task completions, or worse, doom scrolling through the day's notifications. But the Stoic evening review cuts deeper. It's not about patting yourself on the back for checked boxes. It's about confronting where you failed to live up to your principles. Think of it as mental hygiene. Just as you wouldn't skip brushing your teeth because you ate clean all day, you don't skip this review because you think you behaved well. Here's how to practice it. First, replay the day's key moments like scenes in a film, not to judge but to observe. That meeting where you interrupted a colleague. Note it, the moment you bit your tongue instead of complaining about a delay, that counts too. Seneca's method hinged on 3 questions, each designed to distill wisdom from experience. What did I do well today? Where did I act against my values? And most crucially, what one thing will I improve tomorrow? This last question transforms reflection from regret into resolve. Compare this to modern productivity hacks. Corporate retrospectives often focus on metrics, tasks completed, emails sent, while Stoic reviews measure character. Did you act with courage when fear whispered retreat? Did you choose kindness when irritation beckoned? The metrics here aren't quantifiable, but they're infinitely more valuable. A team leader might celebrate hitting quarterly targets, but did they do it by burning out their staff? A parent might check off all the day's chores, but were they truly present with their child? Try this tonight. Set aside 10 minutes, no screens, no distractions. Ask Seneca's 3 questions, but with a modern twist, for what will I improve tomorrow? Pick something concrete yet profound. Not, I'll work harder, but I'll pause 3 seconds before responding to criticism, or I'll say no to one trivial request to protect time for what matters. The key is specificity. Marcus Aurelius didn't write "be better" in his journal. He pinpointed moments. When you wake up sluggish, remember, you're choosing to be less than human by rejecting the gift of reason. There's a reason this practice endures. Modern psychology confirms that deliberate reflection strengthens neural pathways for self-regulation. Athletes review game tape. Musicians replay performances. Why wouldn't you apply the same rigor to the art of living? The evening review isn't about guilt, it's about growth. As Seneca wrote, "Each night I become a little more human." And isn't that the boldest action of all, to face yourself honestly, then choose to rise tomorrow as someone wiser? Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, had zero patience for trivialities. In his lectures, he railed against what he called the disease of time wasting, those endless distractions that nibble away at our days like minnows at breadcrumbs. He didn't just criticize idle gossip or mindless entertainment. He attacked the very mentality that treats life as something to kill time rather than fill with purpose. 2,000 years later, his words cut deeper than ever. Think about your screen time report last week. Those hours lost to scrolling, binge-watching, or refreshing feeds, what did they nourish? Your character, your relationships, or just the algorithms that profit from your attention? The Stoics weren't against leisure. Seneca himself wrote beautifully about the need for rest and play. But they drew a sharp line between renewal and dissipation. Picture 2 people taking a walk. One notices the slant of afternoon light through the trees, feels the crunch of leaves underfoot, returns refreshed. The other spends the same walk glued to their phone, thumbing through notifications, and arrives more drained than when they left. Same activity, wildly different outcomes. That's the Stoic distinction. Frivolity isn't about what you do. It's about how present you are while doing it. Now apply that lens to modern life. The average person checks their phone 144 times a day. Not because they need to, but because boredom, anxiety, or sheer habit drives them to fill every sliver of silence with stimulation. The Stoics would have recognized this instantly, not as technology's fault, but as a failure of attention discipline. Marcus Aurelius warned himself in his journal, "Life is short, that's all you get. Don't waste your share on empty dramas or petty squabbles. Replace dramas with Twitter feuds and petty squabbles with endless group chats," and his advice becomes shockingly current. This isn't about moralizing, it's about opportunity cost. Every minute spent debating celebrity scandals or perfecting selfie angles is a minute you could have spent learning a skill, deepening a friendship, or simply letting your mind wander toward creative breakthroughs. History's most prolific innovators, from Leonardo da Vinci to Marie Curie, guarded their attention like national treasures. They understood what Musonius Rufus taught: the philosopher's school is a surgery. You ought not to walk out of it in pleasure, but in pain, for you arrive suffering from false opinions. Translation: growth requires pruning the trivial to make room for the essential. So here's your challenge. Pick one frivolous habit that's been draining your focus. Maybe it's doom scrolling before bed or getting sucked into reality TV marathons. Now apply the Stoic contempt technique, not self-loathing but clear-eyed reassessment. Ask, does this align with who I want to become? If the answer's no, replace it with something that does. Swap 30 minutes of social media for 30 minutes of reading philosophy. Trade gossip sessions for walks where you observe the world without commenting on it. The goal isn't austerity, it's intentionality, because here's the secret the Stoics knew. When you stop scattering your attention like birdseed, you start noticing something extraordinary. Your life was never empty. It was just buried under noise. Clear the debris, and what remains isn't boredom but possibility. So tell me, what's one distraction you're ready to view with Stoic contempt? The answer might just reveal how much time and life you've been leaving on the table. Marcus Aurelius faced barbarian invasions, betrayals, even a devastating plague, yet his writings reveal not panic but profound calm. His secret weapon, what scholars now call the inner citadel, a mental fortress so impregnable no external chaos could breach it. Picture a medieval castle under siege. Arrows fly, battering rams thunder against the gates, but deep in the heart of the stronghold, the king remains undisturbed. That's the Stoic mind at its peak. Marcus described it like this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But this isn't about escapism. It's about creating an unassailable space where your true self resides, untouched by circumstance. Consider a modern parallel: Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps. Stripped of everything, family, possessions, even his name, he discovered something astonishing. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That's the inner citadel in action. While his body endured starvation and brutality, his mind retreated to a place where gods couldn't reach. He imagined lecturing students about his suffering someday, even crafting jokes to mock his captors. By anchoring himself in meaning, he turned hell into a classroom. Here's how to build your own fortress. Start by identifying your unshakables, the values no storm can topple. For Marcus, it was wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. For you, it might be integrity, creativity, or compassion. Now imagine wrapping them in stone walls. When criticism stings, when plans collapse, when fear whispers retreat, you withdraw to this core, not to hide from reality, but to recenter before engaging. Think of a surgeon in a crisis. Their hands might shake, but their training holds firm. That's the citadel's purpose, to house the part of you that never wavers. Try this visualization tonight. Close your eyes and picture a sanctuary within you, a vaulted hall lit by torchlight, perhaps, or a sunlit courtyard. Furnish it with what anchors you, quotes, memories of resilience, symbols of your purpose. When chaos strikes, visit this place first. Ask, what would my unshaken self do here? The answer won't erase the challenge, but it will reveal the path through it. Because the ultimate Stoic truth isn't that we avoid pain, it's that we grow strong enough to carry it without breaking. Your citadel isn't built in a day. But every brick of conscious choice makes it sturdier, and once it stands, no siege can ever truly touch you. Death is the one deadline none of us can reschedule, yet most of us live as if we've been granted an indefinite extension. Seneca saw this paradox clearly. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. We dread aging, yet postpone dreams as if time is bottomless. We sweat minor setbacks, yet waste years on distractions that leave no mark. Memento Mori isn't meant to paralyze, it's meant to propel. When the Stoics whispered, "Remember you must die," they weren't sowing fear, they were planting urgency. Imagine receiving a diagnosis giving you 1 year to live, not as a morbid fantasy, but as a clarifying lens. What projects would you abandon? Which relationships would you mend? What boldness would you unleash? This isn't about preparing for the end, it's about designing your now. History's most impactful creators understood this. Steve Jobs famously said his cancer scare was the closest I've been to facing death, and it was the most useful tool I've ever encountered to help me make big life choices. Facing mortality didn't diminish him, it distilled him. Here's the twist: you do have an expiration date, you just don't know the label. The average person lives around 30,000 days, less if you subtract time spent sleeping, working, and scrolling. Seneca's warning cuts deeper today. You're arranging your lives as if you'll live forever. You forget your frailty, postpone your wisdom. Procrastination isn't laziness, it's a denial of death's inevitability. So let's make this practical. Grab paper and write 3 headings: stop, start, amplify. Under stop, list what you'd abandon if time was scarce, maybe toxic relationships, soul-draining habits, or projects that no longer align. Under start, name what you've delayed: that business idea, difficult conversation, or creative pursuit. Under amplify, note what deserves more energy: the friendships that light you up, the work that feels like play. This isn't a bucket list, it's a priority sieve. The Stoics didn't just ponder death, they let it edit their lives. When Zeno lost everything in a shipwreck, he didn't rebuild his fortune, he founded Stoicism. His loss became his legacy. That's the alchemy of Memento Mori. It turns the sand in your hourglass into rocket fuel. So ask yourself, if not now, when? And if not this, what's worth your precious numbered days? The answer isn't written on a tombstone, it's waiting in your next choice. Every challenge life throws at you, whether it's a missed promotion, a failed project, or even a job loss, isn't just a setback. The Stoics saw these moments as something far more profound: character tests. Think of it like a blacksmith's forge. The heat isn't there to destroy the metal, it's there to reveal its strength. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming one of history's most revered philosophers, put it bluntly: difficulties show what men are. Therefore, when a difficulty befalls you, remember that God, like a trainer of wrestlers, has matched you with a rough young man. That rough young man might be a layoff, a betrayal, or a financial struggle, but the principle remains the same. These aren't punishments, they're opportunities to discover what you're truly made of. Consider someone who's just lost their job. The initial reaction might be panic, self-doubt, even shame, but the Stoic reframe shifts the narrative entirely. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" they ask, "What does this situation demand of me?" Maybe it's resilience, applying for 10 jobs even when the first 9 say no. Maybe it's humility, taking a temporary role to pay bills while upskilling. Or maybe it's creativity, turning a side hustle into a full-time venture. The test isn't the job loss itself, it's how you respond to it. History is full of people who transformed their tests into turning points. After being fired from Apple, Steve Jobs used his failure to launch Pixar and NeXT Ventures that ultimately brought him back to Apple stronger than ever. J.K. Rowling, jobless and struggling as a single mother, framed her rejections as proof she had nothing left to lose, pouring her energy into a little-known book about a boy wizard. These aren't just inspirational stories, they're modern examples of Stoicism in action. The test wasn't their adversity, it was their interpretation of it. Here's how to apply this today. Think of one recent challenge, big or small. Maybe it was a conflict with a friend, a health scare, or a project that didn't go as planned. Now ask yourself, if this were designed specifically to strengthen me, what quality is it testing? Patience, courage, adaptability. The moment you start seeing obstacles as custom-built training grounds, something shifts. Fear doesn't disappear, but it loses its grip because now you're not a victim of circumstance, you're a student of it. Epictetus didn't just teach this, he lived it. Born into slavery, he could have let his conditions define him. Instead, he treated every hardship as a lesson, eventually earning his freedom and founding a school that shaped generations. His secret, recognizing that life's tests aren't meant to break us, they're meant to reveal us. So the next time you face a challenge, pause and ask, what version of myself is this moment calling forth? The answer might just surprise you. Navy SEAL don't wait for war to test their limits, they deliberately seek out misery in training. Freezing ocean swims, sleepless nights, sand-filled boots worn raw during 100-mile marches. Why? Because they know the body and mind adapt to whatever you consistently expose them to. Comfort breeds fragility, controlled adversity forges resilience. Seneca saw this 2,000 years earlier when he wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days to be content with the plainest food, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself, 'Is this the condition I feared?' That's the essence of voluntary hardship, not punishing yourself but preparing yourself." Think of it like a vaccine. Just as a tiny dose of a virus trains your immune system to handle the real threat, self-imposed challenges inoculate you against life's inevitable shocks. Take cold showers, a simple but potent practice. At first, every cell in your body screams to turn the knob back to warm, but day by day, something shifts. The discomfort doesn't disappear, but your relationship to it does. You start noticing the rush of alertness afterward, the quiet pride in facing something difficult before breakfast. That's the alchemy of controlled adversity. It transforms dread into capability. This principle isn't just for elite warriors. A parent waking up an hour early to read or exercise before the chaos of the day is training for resilience. A student opting to study in a noisy cafe instead of a silent library is conditioning their focus. Even something as small as leaving your phone in another room while you work strengthens your discipline muscle. The scale doesn't matter, the intention does. Here's how to design your own challenge. First, pick an area where comfort has made you soft. Maybe it's physical, replacing elevators with stairs for a month. Mental, reading dense philosophy instead of scrolling before bed. Or emotional, initiating one awkward conversation daily to confront social anxiety. Next, set clear parameters. Not "I'll suffer endlessly," but for 30 days I'll walk to work without a podcast to practice solitude. Finally, track your shifts. Journal how you feel mid-challenge versus afterward. Notice the creeping realization. I thought this would break me. It didn't. The SEAL have a saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable, but the deeper truth. You're already stronger than your comforts have led you to believe. Voluntary hardship just removes the padding so you can finally feel it. So tell me, what's one comfort you're ready to outgrow? The answer might just reveal your next frontier. Breath is the invisible thread connecting every moment of stress to stillness, if you know how to pull it. The Stoics didn't need mindfulness apps or guided meditations. They had something far more portable, the equanimity ritual. Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire in chaos, wrote in his private journal, "Take a deep breath." The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. That simple act, inhaling deliberately, was his secret weapon against the whirlwind of decisions, betrayals, and battles. 2,000 years later, science confirms what he knew instinctively. Controlled breathing lowers cortisol, slows heart rates, and shifts brainwave patterns from frantic beta to focused alpha. But here's what most people miss. It's not just about oxygen. It's about interrupting the autopilot of panic. Think of the last time stress hijacked you. Your chest tightened, your thoughts raced, your vision narrowed, classic fight or flight. Now imagine inserting a pause between that trigger and your reaction. Not a dramatic gesture, just one slow inhale through the nose, held for 4 seconds, then released for 6. That's the Stoic breath. Unlike modern mindfulness apps that often focus on escapism, imagine yourself on a beach. Stoic breathing is about presence, anchoring yourself firmly in the storm, not pretending it isn't there. Navy SEAL use a similar technique called box breathing to steady their aim under gunfire. Firefighters employ it to keep clarity in infernos. The mechanism is universal. When the body can't be calm, the breath teaches it how. Here's how to practice this today. Next time your phone pings with a stressful email, don't reach for it immediately. Place one hand on your belly, the other on your chest, and take 3 Stoic breaths, nose in, hold, mouth out. Feel the diaphragm expand like a bellows, the ribs widen like wings. Notice how the email hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. That's equanimity in action. Marcus didn't write Meditations in a spa. He scrawled it by candlelight in military camps, using breath as his keel in turbulent seas. Compare this to modern mindfulness tools. Apps like Headspace or Calm are fantastic for building habits, but they often externalize the solution. Listen to this recording to relax. Stoicism internalizes it. You already carry the tool. Use it. It's the difference between relying on a GPS and knowing how to read the stars. Both have value, but one fosters independence. Try this experiment. For the next 48 hours, pair every minor annoyance, a red light, a long queue, a delayed train, with a single Stoic breath. Not to dismiss the frustration, but to meet it from a place of choice rather than reflex. Over time, you'll catch yourself breathing deeply before the stress surges, like a sailor adjusting sails before the wind hits. Because that's the real secret the Stoics uncovered. Equanimity isn't the absence of turmoil. It's the mastery of riding its waves without drowning, and the anchor. It's been right under your nose all along. Consider a professional basketball player at the free throw line with seconds left in the championship game. The crowd is roaring, sweat drips into his eyes, and the weight of his team's hopes rests on his shoulders. But here's the paradox. If he focuses on the outcome, whether the ball goes in, he's already lost. His job isn't to control the scoreboard. It's to control his form, his breath, his routine. The shot might miss, but if he executed the process flawlessly, he's done his part. That's the Stoic art of detachment from outcomes in its purest form. Not indifference to results, but liberation from their tyranny. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into a masterclass on inner freedom, put it bluntly: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Notice he doesn't say, don't care what happens. He says, do your part, then let go. There's a critical distinction here. Detachment isn't apathy, it's focus. When an Olympic diver stands on the platform, she isn't thinking about the medal ceremony. She's mentally rehearsing each twist and entry, the judges' scores. Those belong to the judges. Her dive, that's hers alone. Now apply this to your own life. Take a goal you're currently chasing. Maybe it's landing a promotion, hitting a fitness milestone, or growing a creative project. How much mental energy are you spending imagining the outcome versus refining the effort? The Stoics would argue that fixating on results is like a farmer obsessing over his harvest while neglecting to water the crops. Outcomes are downstream, effort is the source. Here's how to practice this shift. First, separate your goal into 2 columns: what I control and what I don't. Under control, list actions like preparation, consistency, and attitude. Under don't control, write external factors: competitors' moves, market trends, others' opinions. Now physically cross out the second column. Those aren't your concerns anymore. Your job is to pour everything into the first column and release the rest. Think of a novelist submitting her manuscript to publishers. She controls the quality of her writing, the research behind each chapter, the discipline of daily pages. She doesn't control which editor reads it on which day, or whether the market craves her genre this season. If she ties her self-worth to publication, she's handing her peace of mind to strangers. But if she measures success by the integrity of her work, she's free, whether the book sells or not. This mindset isn't just philosophical, it's practical. Studies of elite performers, from athletes to musicians, show they share one trait: process orientation. They're not immune to wanting victory, but they've trained themselves to channel that desire into meticulous preparation. A concert pianist doesn't control the audience's reaction, but she can perfect her scales until her fingers move with muscle memory. The paradox: by detaching from outcomes, you often improve them. Try this reframe today. Pick one goal and write down the exact steps within your influence. If it's a job interview, focus on researching the company, crafting thoughtful questions, and rehearsing your stories, not whether you're the perfect candidate. If it's weight loss, prioritize daily movement and mindful eating, not the number on the scale. Like Epictetus advised, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. The magic of detachment isn't that you stop caring. It's that you start trusting in your effort, in your resilience, in your ability to adapt no matter how the dice roll. Because when your worth isn't chained to results, you're free to fail, learn, and try again. And that's where real growth begins. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to think of the whole universe when petty frustrations clouded his mind, not as an escape, but as a lens to see his problems in their true proportion. But here's where the view from above becomes even more transformative. When you zoom out far enough, you start noticing something astonishing. Every person you've ever resented, every stranger who's ever cut you off in traffic, every rival who's ever bested you, they're all bound by the same fragile human condition as you. The emperor wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." That's the universal perspective in action, recognizing that beneath surface conflicts, we're all wrestling with fear, loss, and the quiet hope of being understood. Consider a crowded subway car at rush hour, shoulder to shoulder, yet everyone's locked in their own private world. The student stressing over tuition, the nurse recovering from a double shift, the parent counting pennies until payday. From ground level, it's easy to see only obstacles. Someone takes your seat, a loud conversation intrudes, but elevate your gaze and the scene shifts. Now you're seeing shared fatigue, common dreams, the invisible threads of stress and resilience connecting every head bowed over a phone. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the interdependence of all things. It's not about dismissing your struggles, it's about realizing their variations on themes everyone knows by heart. History's most pivotal moments were shaped by this widening of perspective. When Abraham Lincoln was pressured to crush the South mercilessly after the Civil War, he replied, "Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" That's sympatheia in practice, seeing former combatants as future countrymen. Or take modern examples, addiction recovery programs thrive on shared vulnerability because nothing dissolves resentment like hearing your own story in another's voice. Even social movements gain traction when oppression is framed not as their problem, but as our collective failing. Here's how to practice this today. Next time someone frustrates you, a neglectful coworker, a rude customer, pause and mentally draft their hidden backstory. Maybe the coworker's distraction stems from caring for a sick parent. Maybe the customer's sharp tone masks a morning spent in a chemotherapy chair. This isn't about excusing poor behavior, it's about diffusing the poison of personalization. As Marcus observed, when people injure you, ask yourself, what good or harm did they see in it? Understanding that will bring you clarity, not anger. The universal perspective isn't just philosophical, it's biological. MRI scans show that when people meditate on interconnectedness, their brain activity shifts from the amygdala fear center to the prefrontal cortex reasoning center. Literally, zooming out rewires reactivity into empathy. So try this tonight. List 3 people who have irritated you recently. For each, write 1 sentence imagining a struggle they might carry invisibly. Notice how the heat of annoyance cools into something more nuanced, perhaps even curiosity. Because here's the secret the Stoics uncovered: unity isn't something we find. It's something we remember. The same cosmic dust that forged stars built our bones. The same instinct to survive pulses in every heartbeat. And when you act from that knowing, not as a lofty ideal, but as a daily discipline, you start moving through conflicts not as battles to win, but as knots to untie together. That's the ultimate view from above, realizing the ground beneath us all shakes the same. Seneca's letters cut through time with a blade-sharp truth. Life is long if you know how to use it. At first glance, it sounds absurd. How could a philosopher born 2,000 years ago claim life is long when modern complainers insist there aren't enough hours in the day? But Seneca wasn't talking about the ticking clock. He was diagnosing a pandemic of misused time. Picture 2 people given identical 80-year lifespans. One fills their days chasing promotions, scrolling feeds, and attending obligatory gatherings, then gasps on their deathbed. Where did it all go? The other, the Stoic, measures life not in breaths taken, but in moments that take their breath away. That's the difference between busyness and aliveness. Modern life has perfected the art of distraction masquerading as productivity. We wear sleeplessness like a badge of honor, confuse motion with progress, and treat our calendars like Tetris boards, packing every slot until collapse feels inevitable. Seneca saw this coming. People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it's right to be stingy. The irony: we'll spend 20 minutes comparing prices for a blender, then thoughtlessly surrender entire evenings to autoplay videos. Here's the Stoic audit. Track your time for 3 days, not just work versus leisure, but quality versus filler. How many hours were spent on things that a year from now you'll struggle to recall? Contrast that with moments of true presence, reading to your child without checking your phone, losing yourself in a creative project, or sharing a meal where laughter outlasted the food. The gap between those 2 categories is Seneca's warning in action. You're living as if destined to live forever, he wrote. Your own frailty never occurs to you. Consider Warren Buffett's strategy for prioritization. He once told his pilot to list 25 career goals, then circle the top 5, and avoid the rest at all costs. Why? Because the real enemies of a meaningful life aren't obvious time wasters. They're good things that crowd out the great. The Stoic version is simpler but starker. At the start of each season, write 2 lists: what nourishes me and what drains me. Then act accordingly, not with guilt but with the clarity of someone who knows their days are numbered, and numbered fewer than they'd like. History's most fulfilled creators understood this. Michelangelo spent 4 years flat on his back painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling, knowing it might kill him, but if you knew how much work went into it, he said, you wouldn't call it genius. Not a single minute of that labor felt short to him because he was wholly immersed. Contrast that with modern hustle culture, where burnout is glamorized and the question, how are you, is often answered with busy, as if exhaustion were a virtue. Seneca would have scoffed. Being busy is a form of laziness, lazy thinking, indiscriminate action. So here's the challenge. Tonight, open your calendar and cancel one commitment that's more obligation than joy. Tomorrow, reclaim that hour for something Seneca approved, a walk without headphones, a handwritten letter, or simply sitting with someone you love, fully there. Because the Stoics measured life not in sunsets witnessed, but in attention paid. And that's how you stretch time, not by adding years to your life, but by adding life to your years. Picture this: you're scrolling through your phone when an ad pops up, limited time offer, exclusive discount, countdown ticking. Your finger hovers over the Buy Now button, pulse quickening at the thought of missing out. That split-second pressure to decide, that's exactly where the Stoics would plant a red flag. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned his enslavement into a lesson on inner freedom, warned, "No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen." What sounds like agricultural advice is actually a masterclass in decision-making. The ripest choices, like the sweetest figs, aren't plucked in haste. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient wisdom. When faced with quick decisions, our brains default to the amygdala, the reactive, emotional center. But given just a few extra moments, the prefrontal cortex engages, bringing logic and long-term perspective. That limited time offer preys on the first system. The Stoic pause activates the second. Financial impulses are perfect training grounds because the stakes feel real: wasted money, buyer's remorse, cluttered spaces, but rarely catastrophic. Every unnecessary purchase is a tiny lesson in impulsivity. Here's how to practice the Stoic pause today. For any non-urgent decision, a new gadget, a gym membership, even a contentious email reply, institute the 24-hour rule. When the impulse strikes, set a timer. If the desire fades before it rings, you've dodged a distraction. If it persists, you've earned clarity. Marcus Aurelius used a similar filter, asking, "Is this necessary?" Modern equivalents abound. Warren Buffett waits overnight before major investments. Oprah keeps a 24-hour yes policy for commitments. The mechanism is universal, inserting friction between impulse and action. Consider two colleagues receiving criticism from their boss. One fires off a defensive email within minutes. The other sleeps on it, then drafts a response acknowledging valid points while clarifying misunderstandings. The difference isn't intelligence, it's the pause. Epictetus framed it as reclaiming sovereignty. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things he has not, but rejoices for those he has. Applied to decisions, this means valuing discernment over speed, substance over immediacy. Financial decisions simply make the stakes visible. That $200 impulse buy equals 5 hours of work for someone earning $40/hour. Would you trade an afternoon of labor for that shiny object? The Stoic pause makes the exchange explicit, but the practice scales to life's bigger choices: relationships, career moves, even political stances. What seems urgent in the moment often withers under the sunlight of reflection. Try this reframe. View every decision as a conversation between your present and future self. The present self wants the dopamine hit of instant gratification. The future self pays the price of clutter, debt, or regret. The pause is where you advocate for the person you're becoming. Because the ultimate Stoic truth isn't that we should decide slowly, it's that the best choices ripen when given time. Cato the Younger once walked into Rome's Senate with his togas torn and his body bruised, fresh from a public beating ordered by Julius Caesar. The reason: he refused to stop speaking truth to power. As blood dripped onto the marble floor, he didn't flinch, he kept arguing. That's the kind of unshakable resolve the Stoics called prokopton, the act of progressing toward virtue by embodying your heroes. But here's the twist: you don't need a Senate floor or a tyrant to test your mettle. The grocery store checkout line, your morning commute, or a tense family dinner can all become proving grounds when you ask one simple question: what would Cotto do here? This isn't about cosplaying historical figures, it's about borrowing their spines. Modern psychology calls it role model priming, where channeling someone else's traits temporarily boosts your own capabilities. Studies show that when nurses imagine themselves as Florence Nightingale before a difficult shift, their compassion and focus measurably increase. The Stoics just weaponized this earlier. They kept mental dossiers of heroes, not for worship but for access. When Epictetus faced betrayal, he channeled Socrates' calm before his unjust execution. When Marcus Aurelius felt the weight of empire, he conjured Antoninus' steady hand on the throne. These weren't fantasies, they were psychological lifelines. So how do you practice this? Start by picking your Stoic avatar. Maybe it's Cotto's fearlessness, Seneca's grace under pressure, or even a modern equivalent. Think Mandela's patience in prison or Malala's courage after being shot. Now assign them to your daily struggles. Staring at a pile of overdue tasks, channel Marcus at his desk before dawn, writing meditations between battles. Avoiding a tough conversation, picture Epictetus, the former slave, calmly debating emperors. The goal isn't to replicate their lives, it's to raid their toolkits. Here's where most people get stuck. They choose heroes too distant from their reality. A single mom working 2 jobs won't resonate with a billionaire philosopher king. That's why the Stoics emphasized relatable virtue. If Cotto feels too larger than life, pick someone closer: a grandparent who endured hardship without complaint, a teacher who changed your life with quiet persistence. The key is specificity. Instead of "be brave like Cotto," ask, "How would Cotto handle this rude customer?" Or, "How would my grandmother navigate this unfair criticism?" Suddenly, abstract ideals become actionable scripts. Try this tonight. Review your day and pick one moment where you hesitated or reacted poorly. Now, rewrite it with your chosen hero in your shoes. Did you snap at a loved one? How would Marcus, who ruled an empire yet wrote, "Kindness is invincible," have responded? Did you procrastinate on a dream? What would Seneca, who warned, "Life is long if you know how to use it," have prioritized? The gap between those two versions isn't failure, it's your training manual. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: courage isn't a trait you're born with, it's a costume you try on daily until it stitches itself to your skin. And the wardrobe, it's been open to you all along, filled with the examples of those who walked through fire and left maps in their ashes. All you have to do is step in. Imagine standing in front of 2 doors. One is labeled essential, the things that truly shape your character and peace of mind. The other is marked indifferent, the externals that life can give or take away without altering your core. This is the essence of the Stoic indifference exercise, a mental sorting hat that forces you to confront a radical question: how much of what you chase actually matters? Epictetus, the philosopher who turned his enslavement into a masterclass on freedom, put it bluntly: it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. That dusty lamp in your attic, you call it junk until an appraiser declares it a priceless antique. Same lamp, different label. The indifference exercise strips away those labels, revealing desire for what it really is, a story you've agreed to believe. Start by grabbing paper and drawing 2 columns. On the left, list your preferred indifference, things you enjoy but could live without: a promotion, a luxury car, even your favorite coffee mug. These aren't trivial, they're just not essential to your integrity or happiness. Now, the right column: virtues and choices, things that are essential. Your honesty, your resilience, how you treat strangers. The Stoics weren't saying you shouldn't prefer comfort or success. They were reminding you that clinging to them as if they define you is the recipe for misery. Here's where modern life twists the knife. Social media has wired us to confuse preferred indifference with moral imperatives. That dream vacation isn't just a want, it's a lifestyle benchmark. The latest phone isn't a tool, it's a status sacrament. The indifference exercise exposes this sleight of hand. When you categorize desires, you'll notice something unsettling. Most of what stresses you lives in the left column. That argument over who got the bigger office, indifferent. The envy you feel scrolling curated feeds, indifferent. The sting of criticism from someone you don't respect. Indifferent, but here's the twist: indifference doesn't mean apathy. The Stoics celebrated joy in externals. They just refused to chain their self-worth to them. Think of a chef who takes pride in a Michelin star but would cook with equal love in a roadside diner, or an athlete who trains for gold but finds equal fulfillment in the discipline itself. That's the golden mean, enjoying the world without being enslaved by it. Try this today. Pick one desire gnawing at you: a bigger house, a viral post, a rival's approval. Ask, if I never attain this, what remains of me? If the answer is everything that matters, you found Stoic footing. If it's nothing, that's the signal to rebuild your foundations. Because the ultimate power of this exercise isn't in denying what you want, it's in realizing how much you already have that can never be taken. And that's the kind of wealth no market crash can touch. Ulysses tied himself to the mast of his ship because he knew something fundamental about human nature. We're terrible at resisting temptation in the heat of the moment, but brilliant at outsmarting it in advance. That's the core of the Stoic pre-commitment strategy, creating defenses against your future self's weakest moments. Seneca saw this clearly when he wrote, "The best way to conquer desire is to prevent it from arising." Not through sheer willpower in the face of temptation, but by designing your environment so temptation never gets a foothold. Think about modern diet struggles. You might swear off sugar every morning only to cave by afternoon when donuts appear in the office kitchen. The Stoic approach, a Ulysses pact, a binding decision made in advance. Instead of relying on willpower, you pre-commit, packing healthy snacks so hunger never drives you to the break room, or using apps that block food delivery sites during work hours. It's not about fighting temptation, it's about removing the battlefield entirely. The same principle applies to productivity. How many times have you sat down to work only to find yourself scrolling social media 30 minutes later? The ancient version might have been Seneca's students getting distracted by chariot races outside the lecture hall. His solution, pre-commitment. Today, that could mean using website blockers during work hours, scheduling devices to lock after 9 p.m., or even something as simple as leaving your phone in another room before starting a project. Here's why this works. Our brains have two decision-making systems. The cold state makes rational, long-term choices when we're calm. The hot state takes over when we're tired, stressed, or tempted, and it's notoriously short-sighted. Pre-commitments let your cold state protect your hot state from itself. It's like leaving your jogging shoes by the bed the night before an early run. When the alarm goes off, you're not debating whether to exercise. You're just following a script you wrote when you were thinking clearly. Try this today. Pick one area where you consistently struggle with self-sabotage. Maybe late-night snacking, procrastination, or impulse purchases. Now create one irreversible pre-commitment. If it's spending, freeze your credit cards in a block of ice. If it's productivity, schedule an automatic focus mode on your devices during work hours. The key is making the barrier to failure higher than your future tempted self will bother to climb. Seneca praised this approach in his letters. The man who arranges his affairs so that nothing unexpected can befall him has taken the most important step toward peace of mind. That's the gift of pre-commitment. It turns willpower from a daily battle into a one-time strategic victory. And once you've tasted that kind of control, you'll start spotting opportunities to tie yourself to the mast everywhere. Seneca once wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius describing an extraordinary mental exercise. He would regularly imagine himself stripped of everything, his wealth, his status, even his freedom. Set aside certain days where you withdraw from comforts, he advised, and learn to want little so that you can endure much. This wasn't mere pessimism, it was preemptive resilience training. Picture a fire drill for the soul. By mentally rehearsing exile, poverty, or disgrace, Seneca wasn't inviting disaster. He was immunizing himself against fear's grip when fortune inevitably shifted. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation, and it's used everywhere from astronaut training to PTSD therapy. NASA doesn't wait for an actual emergency to teach astronauts how to handle equipment failures. They simulate disasters in zero-gravity mock-ups until the unthinkable feels manageable. The Stoics were doing the same with their minds centuries earlier. When Seneca envisioned losing his villas and silks, he wasn't practicing despair, he was debugging it. By exposing himself to imagined catastrophes, he discovered something liberating. The worst-case scenario, when examined closely, often loses its fangs. Here's how to apply this today with a professional fear rehearsal. Pick one career anxiety keeping you up at night, getting laid off, missing a crucial deadline, or public humiliation during a presentation. Now, vividly walk through the scenario. If you lost your job tomorrow, what's your step-by-step response? You'd update your resume, tap your network, maybe explore freelance opportunities. You'd realize your skills haven't vanished, just their current container. That embarrassing presentation flop, it becomes a story you'll laugh about later, a lesson in preparation. The key isn't just acknowledging the fear, it's scripting your comeback. Consider how elite athletes use this technique. Before a championship game, they don't just visualize victory, they rehearse fumbles, fouls, and fatigue. Why? Because when the moment comes, their nervous system recognizes the challenge. The pulse quickens, but the mind stays clear. That's the power of fear rehearsal. It turns the unknown into the familiar. Try this exercise tonight. Write down your professional nightmare, the one that makes your stomach drop. Then, beneath it, outline 3 concrete actions you'd take to recover. Notice what happens. The monster under the bed shrinks into a problem with solutions, because that's Seneca's real lesson. Exile isn't the end. It's just a new chapter waiting for your pen. And once you've faced that truth in your imagination, no boardroom or bad break can ever truly exile you from yourself. There's a power move the Stoics mastered that costs nothing, requires no training, and disarms tension better than any argument, the simple act of smiling in the face of chaos. Epictetus, who knew a thing or two about maintaining composure under pressure, having lived as a slave before becoming philosophy's most famous teacher, put it plainly: don't let your expression betray what's happening in your soul. At first, that might sound like suppression or fakery, but look closer, it's actually about reclaiming agency. When your flight gets cancelled, when your computer crashes, when someone snaps at you unfairly, your smile isn't denial. It's defiance, a silent declaration that external storms won't dictate your inner weather. Science backs this ancient hack. Studies on facial feedback show that the mere act of smiling, even when forced, triggers neurochemical shifts. Cortisol drops, endorphins rise. Your brain literally interprets the curve of your lips as evidence that all is well, dialing down stress responses. Think of it like a physiological cheat code. The Stoics didn't have fMRI machines, but they intuited something profound. Emotions aren't just felt, they're acted into being. By choosing your expression, you steer your emotional state rather than being dragged by it. Here's where most people misunderstand Stoic composure. It's not about bottling up frustration or pretending irritation doesn't exist. It's about decoupling the external trigger from your internal experience. Picture two drivers stuck in the same traffic jam. One white-knuckles the wheel, muttering curses. The other takes a deep breath, turns up the music, and chuckles at the absurdity. Same situation, wildly different journeys. That's the Stoic smile in action, not a mask, but a lens that reframes chaos as a test of your equilibrium. Try this today with minor irritations. When the barista gets your order wrong, smile as you politely correct it. When your Wi-Fi lags during a call, grin at the irony instead of groaning. Notice what happens. The frustration doesn't vanish, it just loses its grip on you. There's a reason martial artists smile during sparring or seasoned diplomats remain composed in negotiations. They're not unfeeling, they're strategic. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Your calm isn't for their benefit, it's armor for your soul. But here's the real magic: the Stoic smile isn't just defensive, it's contagious. Ever noticed how a single relaxed person in a tense room can lower everyone's blood pressure? That's social neuroscience at work. Mirror neurons cause others to unconsciously mimic your demeanor, creating a ripple effect. Imagine diffusing a heated team meeting not with platitudes but with unshakable calm. Or disarming a rude stranger not with confrontation but with unbothered kindness. The smile becomes a tool of influence, proving Epictetus right. You can be invincible if you never enter a contest where victory isn't up to you. So here's your challenge. For the next 48 hours, turn life's petty annoyances into secret training grounds. Let the long line at the pharmacy be your dojo. Let the spilled coffee be your meditation bell. Smile not because everything's perfect, but because you're practicing something far more powerful: the art of meeting chaos with unbroken poise. Because the Stoics knew something we often forget: you don't control the world, but you always control the curve of your lips, and sometimes that's enough to change everything. Marcus Aurelius never wasted energy complaining about rain during military campaigns or senators who betrayed him. He saw grumbling as a theft of attention from what truly mattered. In his meditations, he wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, then throw it out. There are brambles in the path, then go around. That's all you need to know." That's the Stoic approach to life's irritations: not denial, but decisive action or acceptance. No drama, no endless venting, just a clear-eyed response. But here's the challenge: most of us don't throw out the bitter cucumber. We take bite after bitter bite while loudly announcing how awful it tastes. That's where the anti-complaint day comes in: a deliberate 24-hour fast from all forms of complaint, transforming you from commentator to commander of your experience. Start by carrying a small notebook or using your phone's notes app. Every time you feel the urge to complain about traffic, weather, someone's tone, jot it down without speaking it aloud. This isn't about suppressing frustration, it's about spotting patterns. You'll quickly notice two things. First, how many complaints are recycled versions of yesterday's gripes, and second, how few of them are actually worth your energy. A study from Stanford found that the average person complains about 30 times a day, often without realizing it. That's 30 micro moments where they're rehearsing helplessness instead of exercising agency. The magic of this exercise isn't just in silencing complaints, it's in what rushes in to replace them. When you stop vocalizing, "This meeting is pointless," you start asking, "How can I steer it toward value?" Instead of grumbling about a delayed flight, You might strike up a conversation with a fellow traveler or dive into that book you've been meaning to read. Complaining is like pouring sugar into your mental gas tank. It feels satisfying in the moment, but it gums up the engine of action. Try this reframe. View complaints as unfinished problem solving. That coworker who always interrupts, instead of venting to colleagues, prepare polite but firm phrases like, "I'd love to hear your thoughts after I finish this point." The Wi-Fi that constantly drops. Research signal boosters or schedule calls during low traffic hours. The Stoics called this turning obstacles into fuel, using friction as the spark for improvement rather than the kindling for resentment. Here's the ultimate test of your anti-complaint day. Share your findings with someone you trust, not as a rant. "You won't believe how much I wanted to complain today," but as data. "I noticed I griped about housework 6 times. Maybe it's time to renegotiate chores with my partner." That's the shift Marcus Aurelius modeled, transforming observations into opportunities for wiser choices. Because when you stop feeding complaints with airtime, you starve pettiness and feast on progress. And that's when you discover how much lighter life feels when your mind isn't cluttered with constant commentary on what went wrong. Imagine holding a compass that doesn't point north, but instead points to where your power truly lies. That's the essence of the Stoic Circle of influence, a concept Stephen Covey later popularized, but one that traces straight back to Epictetus's razor-sharp wisdom. Some things are within our power while others are not. At its core, this exercise isn't just about sorting your concerns into categories. It's about reclaiming your agency in a world that constantly tries to convince you you're helpless. Picture 2 concentric circles. The outer ring, that's the circle of concern packed with everything that worries you but that you can't actually control. The weather, traffic jams, other people's opinions, the stock market. The inner ring, that's your circle of influence, the things you can shape. Your effort, your attitude, your daily habits, your responses. Most people spend their lives anxiously pacing the outer ring, shouting at storms. The Stoics, they plant themselves firmly in the inner circle and build from there. Let's make this tangible. Grab a sheet of paper and draw those 2 circles right now. Start filling the outer one with your current worries. Maybe it's a looming layoff at your company, a friend who's pulling away, or even something as trivial as the neighbor's dog that won't stop barking at night. Now pause and scrutinize each item. That potential layoff. You can't control corporate decisions, but you can update your resume, network proactively, or finally start that side hustle. The distant friend. You can't force them to reconnect, but you can send a heartfelt message with no expectation of reply. Even the barking dog. You might not silence it, but you can invest in noise-canceling headphones or rearrange your workspace. The moment you start migrating items from the outer ring to the inner, something shifts. Anxiety loses its grip because you're no longer a passive observer of your life. You're an active participant. History's most resilient figures operated this way. Consider Viktor Frankl in Auschwitz. His outer circle contained horrors no one could control: starvation, cruelty, the constant shadow of death. But his inner circle, that's where he made his stand, choosing his attitude, finding meaning in suffering, even imagining future lectures about his ordeal to help others. Or take modern examples like athletes who focus not on uncontrollable referees or weather conditions, but on their own preparation and mindset. The pattern is universal. Those who thrive don't ignore external chaos. They simply refuse to let it dominate their energy. Here's where most people get tripped up. They confuse caring with controlling. You can deeply care about climate change, social justice, or a loved one's health without deluding yourself into thinking you single-handedly control those outcomes. The Stoic approach, Pour your passion into the slice of the issue you can influence: volunteering, educating others, making sustainable choices. Then release the rest. This isn't apathy, it's strategic engagement. Think of it like a gardener who doesn't rage against droughts but focuses on efficient watering systems. The garden might still suffer, but it won't wither from neglect. Try this today. Pick one outer circle worry consuming your mental space. Maybe it's a political issue you feel powerless over, or a family conflict that seems stuck. Now list 3 concrete actions, no matter how small, that live squarely in your inner circle. For politics, it might be educating yourself on local elections rather than doom-scrolling national headlines. For the family tension, it could be writing a letter to express your feelings without demanding reconciliation. The goal isn't to solve everything overnight, it's to redirect your energy from futile fretting to meaningful motion. Epictetus, who knew a thing or two about powerlessness, having been born a slave, left us this liberating truth. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. That's the real magic of mapping your circles. It doesn't just show you where your power ends, it reveals where it begins. And once you've felt the weight of that truth, you'll never again mistake concern for control. Your energy is finite, the world's chaos is not. Where will you invest yours? Every night before bed, the ancient Stoics held up an invisible mirror, not to check their appearance, but to scrutinize something far more revealing: their alignment with virtue. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, framed this practice with piercing clarity. Virtue consists in a will that is in agreement with nature. But what does that actually look like in the clutter of modern life? Imagine ending your day not by scrolling through social media or tallying tasks completed, but by asking 4 razor-sharp questions. Did I act with courage today when fear whispered retreat? Did I exercise wisdom in that heated conversation? Was I just in how I treated that difficult person? Did I practice self-control when temptation tugged? That's the virtue mirror, a tool that doesn't just reflect what you did, but who you were while doing it. Most of us evaluate our days through the lens of productivity or mood. I checked off my to-do list, or I felt stressed all afternoon. The Stoics proposed a radical alternative. Measure your life by the cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Picture a teacher grading your actions not on outcomes, but on ethical integrity. That argument with your partner, did you speak truth with kindness, wisdom, or did you weaponize silence, cowardice? That impulse purchase, was it a genuine need, temperance, or a salve for boredom, indulgence? The virtue mirror strips away excuses, revealing the gap between who you are and who you aspire to be. Here's how to practice this tonight. Grab any notebook and sketch 4 columns, 1 for each virtue. Under courage, note moments you faced discomfort willingly. Maybe you gave critical feedback instead of avoiding conflict, or you resisted the safety of silence in a meeting. Under wisdom, record decisions guided by reason over emotion. Perhaps you paused before replying to a provocation, or you researched before forming an opinion. Justice isn't just about fairness to others, it's about honoring your own boundaries too. Did you say no to a request that would have drained you? That counts. Temperance might include resisting the 3rd drink or choosing patience over road rage. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Zeno's insistence on consistency wasn't about rigid self-judgment. It was about creating an inner compass so reliable that even in chaos, you'd know true north. Think of a nurse working a double shift. Her exhaustion is real, but when she treats her 10th patient with the same care as her first, that's virtue in motion. Or consider a modern entrepreneur who chooses transparency over easy profits. Their ledger might show smaller gains, but their character compound interest grows. The magic of this practice: over time, the mirror doesn't just reflect, it shapes. When you start rating your choices by virtues instead of victories, something shifts. That tempting shortcut loses its allure because it would tarnish your self-respect. The difficult conversation becomes necessary because avoiding it would mean betraying your courage. The Stoics knew what modern psychology confirms: we become what we consistently measure. So tonight, when the world quietens, ask not just, "What did I do today?" but "How did I live?" The answer might just redefine tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius had a habit that would baffle most modern minds. He thanked his critics. Not with hollow politeness, but with genuine appreciation for the friction they created. In Meditations, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the essence of enemy gratitude, recognizing that the people who challenge us, undermine us, or even oppose us are often the ones who sharpen us most. Think of a blade being honed against a whetstone. The pressure feels destructive, but the result is a finer edge. Consider how this plays out in real life. A writer receives a scathing review calling their work derivative. Their first instinct might be rage or self-doubt, but the Stoic approach: mine the critique for truth. Maybe one line in that rant reveals a blind spot, a cliché they'd overlooked, or a trope they'd leaned on too heavily. Suddenly, the enemy becomes an unwitting editor, spotlighting growth opportunities they'd never have seen otherwise. Even baseless criticism can teach resilience, like a vaccine injecting just enough hostility to build immunity against future attacks. History's most resilient figures practiced this. Abraham Lincoln filled his cabinet with political rivals, men who'd openly mocked him. Why? Because he knew dissent forces sharper thinking. Steve Jobs, after being ousted from Apple, later credited that humiliation with teaching him humility and creativity he'd never have learned otherwise. The pattern is universal. Friction creates traction. Here's how to apply this today. Pick one critic, past or present. Maybe it's a boss who micromanaged you, a competitor who outperformed you, or even an internet troll. Write them a short letter. You don't have to send it, acknowledging one lesson their opposition taught you. Did their skepticism push you to prepare more thoroughly? Did their success reveal gaps in your own strategy? The goal isn't to excuse poor behavior, but to reclaim the narrative. As Epictetus put it, if someone hands you a gift and you refuse it, who owns it? By refusing to accept insults as injuries, you leave critics holding the weight of their own bitterness while you walk away lighter. This isn't about masochism or false positivity. It's about cold-eyed pragmatism. Every great athlete has a rival who pushes them to train harder. Every innovator faces skeptics who force them to refine their ideas. Your adversaries are just part of the curriculum, rough professors in the school of resilience. So next time someone throws a stone in your path, don't just step over it. Pick it up, examine its edges. You might find it's the exact material you need to build your next bridge. Seneca once watched a wealthy Roman nobleman agonize for hours over which shade of purple to dye his toga, a decision that would have zero impact on his health, happiness, or legacy. The philosopher later wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor." That's the paradox of choice in action. The more trivial decisions we allow to clutter our mental landscape, the less energy remains for what truly matters. Modern research confirms this ancient insight. Studies show the average adult makes over 35,000 decisions daily, from what to eat for breakfast to which email to answer first. Each one, no matter how small, chips away at our finite willpower like waves eroding a cliff. But here's the good news: unlike the cliff, you get to choose which waves hit you. Start by identifying one inconsequential choice that hijacks your focus daily. Maybe it's debating which takeout to order, scrolling endlessly to pick a podcast, or rearranging your to-do list instead of tackling it. Now eliminate it, not by making a better choice, by making no choice at all. Designate a default. Meal prep the same high-protein breakfast every Monday. Assign a uniform of interchangeable work outfits, or use a randomizer app to pick your leisure activity. The goal isn't rigidity, it's conservation. Think of Steve Jobs' iconic black turtlenecks or Einstein's identical suits. They weren't style statements but cognitive shortcuts. By automating trivialities, they preserved mental bandwidth for groundbreaking ideas. This practice isn't about deprivation, it's about liberation. Consider how much mental real estate gets wasted on decisions with no meaningful stakes. A study in the Journal of Health Psychology found that people who ate the same healthy lunch daily reported higher productivity and lower stress than those who varied their meals. Why? Because every "what should I eat" moment is a tiny leak in your focus reservoir. The Stoics called this ataraxia, a state of tranquility achieved by reducing unnecessary fluctuations. Here's how to implement this today. Pick one area where decision fatigue creeps in: your morning routine, your workout schedule, even your grocery list. Strip it down to a single, repeatable option for the next 7 days. Notice what happens to your energy levels when you're no longer debating whether to hit snooze or go for a run. The alarm rings and your sneakers are already by the door. That's the power of minimalist decisions. They turn willpower from a dwindling resource into a renewable one. Because when you stop burning mental fuel on trivial detours, you'll find you have plenty left for the journey that matters. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, didn't just lecture about virtue, he sweated for it. In a world where philosophy was often confined to lecture halls, he insisted that, just as we must train the soul, so must we train the body. This wasn't about vanity or athleticism. It was about something far more profound: the recognition that physical health isn't separate from moral excellence, it's the foundation. Think of a musician whose fingers cramp mid-performance or a speaker whose voice falters under stress. No matter how brilliant their ideas, their bodies become the bottleneck. The Stoics saw this truth centuries ago. Discipline starts with flesh and blood. Consider how modern life has divorced movement from meaning. We jog to burn calories, lift weights to sculpt aesthetics, or stretch to relieve stiffness, all reactive, transactional approaches. The Stoic reframe: treat your body as the first arena of virtue. When Musonius Rufus demanded his students dig gardens and chop wood, he wasn't building farmers, he was forging resilience. The blisters on their hands weren't just calluses, they were proof they could endure discomfort for a purpose. This changes everything. That morning run isn't just cardio, it's courage training. The salad you choose over fast food isn't just nutrition, it's a vote for self-mastery. Science now catches up to this ancient wisdom. Studies show exercise boosts not just endorphins but executive function, literally upgrading your brain's ability to make wise decisions. Neuroscientist Wendy Suzuki calls movement the most transformative thing you can do for your brain today. The Stoics would nod, of course. How can you practice patience if your blood sugar crashes by noon? Or courage if your sedentary body floods with fatigue at the first challenge? Your muscles and your morals are wired to the same nervous system. Here's how to put this into practice. Pick one health habit not based on vanity, but on virtue alignment. Ask, what physical limitation currently undermines my character? If irritability plagues you when hungry, design meal prep as temperance training. If procrastination strikes when tired, treat sleep hygiene as discipline practice. Even something as simple as posture, sitting upright instead of slouching, becomes a kinesthetic reminder of dignity. Take inspiration from the Roman legionaries who marched 30 miles a day in full gear. Their endurance wasn't just for battle, it was mental armor against life's unpredictability. Or modern parallels like David Goggins, the Navy SEAL who transformed obesity into ultramarathons, not to win medals but to prove the only limits that exist are the ones you place on yourself. That's the Stoic body in action, physical challenges as metaphors for inner fortitude. Your turn. This week, add purpose to your movement. Lift weights not just to look strong, but to be strong for others when they need carrying. Hike not just for views, but to practice perseverance when the path steepens. Even a cold shower becomes a miniature triumph, proof that comfort doesn't own you. Because when you treat your body as more than a vessel, but as the first student of your philosophy, every ache whispers, this is how you grow, and that's where true strength begins. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's most revered philosophers, never faced the ping of a smartphone notification, yet his warning cut straight to the heart of our modern crisis. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. Don't wish to seem knowledgeable about things you don't know. Substitute extraneous matters with endless scrolling, and you've got a blueprint for digital sanity. The average person now touches their phone over 2,500 times a day, fracturing attention into fragments too small to sustain deep thought. But here's the Stoic countermove. Just as ancient philosophers carved out hours for contemplation, we must designate tech-free sanctuaries in time, not as punishment, but as reclamation. Imagine your mind as a clear pool. Every tweet, email alert, and breaking news update is a pebble tossed into the water. At first, the ripples seem harmless. But by midday, the surface is so disturbed you can't see your own reflection. That's why the Stoic approach to technology isn't about rejection, it's about curation. Start with something radical yet simple, the sunrise and sunset rule. For the first and last hour of your day, your phone stays in airplane mode. No checking emails before your feet hit the floor. No doom scrolling as you wind down. These become sacred hours for journaling, reading, or simply staring out the window, activities that don't consume attention but restore it. History's greatest minds thrived in analog worlds, but their principles translate perfectly. Seneca practiced subsidium, the deliberate use of tools without becoming enslaved by them. Picture him writing letters by candlelight, undistracted by the chatter of Rome's forums. Fast forward to today, author Cal Newport schedules digital Sabbaths where he disappears into the woods with a paperback, while tech CEOs like Bill Gates famously think weeks in secluded cabins, armed only with books and notebooks. The common thread: they don't wait for focus to magically appear, they engineer it by removing the obstacles. Here's how to begin. Pick one daily ritual that currently involves screens, your morning coffee, lunch break, or bedtime routine, and redesign it as a tech-free zone. Use a physical book instead of a news app. Grab a notepad instead of your phone to jot ideas. At first, you'll feel phantom vibrations, the itch to check. That's your brain detoxing. Like a muscle sore from disuse, your attention span is relearning how to flex. The Stoics called this ascesis, disciplined practice. And just as athletes don't train while distracted, neither should your mind. The ultimate goal isn't monasticism, it's intentionality. When you do engage with technology, do it like Marcus Aurelius engaging with political adversaries, with purpose, not passive absorption. Turn off all non-essential notifications. Use apps like Freedom or Cold Turkey to block time-sucking sites during work hours. Even something as simple as grayscale mode on your phone, removing colorful app icons, can reduce dopamine-driven urges. These aren't restrictions, they're the modern equivalent of Epictetus discarding unnecessary luxuries to sharpen his focus. Try this experiment tonight. Charge your phone in another room. Notice how the absence of that tiny screen alters the space, how conversations deepen, how thoughts unspool without interruption. That's the digital Stoic's secret. By periodically stepping back from the noise, you don't just recharge your devices, you reclaim your humanity. And in a world hell-bent on hijacking your attention, that's the quietest form of rebellion there is. Picture this, your name carved into stone, followed by just 7 words that sum up your entire existence. What would they say? Here lies a tireless worker, beloved parent and friend. Or something more daring, he dared greatly, or she left no words unsaid. This is the legacy drill, a Stoic exercise that cuts through life's noise by asking one jarring question. If today were your last, what would you want etched into the collective memory of those you leave behind? Seneca, who faced his own mortality with unflinching clarity, put it this way: life is long if you know how to use it. What's the point of surviving if you're not really living? That's the heart of this practice, measuring your days not by their number, but by their weight. Start by drafting your epitaph, not the safe, sanitized version for public consumption, but the raw truth of how you wish to be remembered. Be ruthless. She made everyone comfortable might sound nice, but does it capture the fire you carry? Compare 2 tombstones. One reads, "Never missed a day of work." The other, "Changed how we see the world." Which one pulses with purpose? This isn't about ego, it's about alignment. Your ideal epitaph is a compass pointing toward the life you're meant to lead. Now go deeper. Write a legacy statement, a paragraph explaining how you'll bridge the gap between who you are and who that epitaph describes. Think like a sculptor planning how to free the statue from the marble. If your epitaph says, "Built bridges where others saw walls," your legacy statement might include, "I will listen first in conflicts, seek common ground in disagreements, and speak truth even when it's uncomfortable." Notice the shift from vague aspiration to concrete action. Marcus Aurelius didn't journal, "Be a good emperor." He wrote specific reminders. When you wake up, tell yourself, "Today I shall meet meddling, ungrateful, arrogant people. I'll still choose kindness." History's most enduring figures lived with this intentionality. Abraham Lincoln didn't aim for presidential libraries or monuments. He obsessed over preserving the Union. Frida Kahlo didn't paint for fame. She turned pain into art that would outlive her. Their legacies weren't accidents, they were daily choices stacked like bricks. Your turn, grab paper and answer. What will people cite as my defining contribution? Not your job title or possessions, but the imprint you left on hearts and minds. Maybe it's taught others to find joy in small things, or fought tirelessly for those without a voice. Here's the twist Seneca would applaud. Once you've written your legacy statement, live backward from it. Every morning, ask, did yesterday's actions nudge me closer to that epitaph? Every evening, audit, where did I compromise my legacy today? This isn't morbid, it's liberating. When you stop living by default and start designing by design, something extraordinary happens. The petty distractions that once consumed you, office politics, superficial trends, others' opinions start to feel like shadows flickering against a greater fire. So try this now. Don't just think it, ink it. Your epitaph isn't waiting in some distant future. It's being written today with every yes and no, every silence and outburst, every moment you choose courage over comfort. And when you stand at that crossroads, remember Seneca's sharpest prod. You're afraid of dying. Tell me, is the life you're leading worth clinging to? If the answer doesn't align with your epitaph, it's not death you should fear, it's an unfinished life. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." But here's the twist. He wasn't talking about grand monuments or public accolades. He was referring to the quiet, unseen acts of kindness that ripple through lives long after we're gone. This is the heart of the Stoic gift, giving without the faintest whisper of expectation. No thank yous, no recognition, no cosmic scorekeeping. Think of it as emotional aikido, where you redirect the energy of ego into pure, unfiltered generosity. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they embedded it in their daily lives. Seneca gave away fortunes anonymously. Epictetus taught students to serve others, as the hand feeds the mouth without applause. And Marcus himself, despite ruling an empire, made time to write letters of encouragement to grieving citizens, not for legacy, but because it was simply the right thing to do. Now, contrast this with modern giving, where every donation comes with a named plaque, every favor waits for reciprocation, and social media turns kindness into content. There's nothing wrong with visible generosity, but the Stoics would argue it's the hidden gifts that forge unshakable character. Why? Because when no one's watching, your actions become pure reflections of your values, untarnished by external validation. It's like strength training for integrity. The heavier the lift, the more inconvenient the gift, the stronger your moral core becomes. Here's how to practice this today. Pick one secret good deed, something small but meaningful. Pay for the coffee of the person behind you in line and leave before they notice. Slip an encouraging note into a colleague's drawer without signing it. Shovel a neighbor's driveway before dawn. The key is anonymity, not just to protect their pride, but to fortify your own humility. As you walk away, savor the quiet thrill of being a silent force for good. That's the Stoic high, the realization that the greatest rewards aren't applause or gratitude, but the private knowledge that you've made the world marginally brighter. History's most profound changemakers understood this dynamic. An anonymous donor in the 1920s funded the education of an entire generation of black scientists, including Dr. Percy Julian, who would later pioneer life-saving medicines. No statues bear their name, but their impact is immortal. Or consider modern equivalents, the nurse who stays late to comfort a dying patient when no supervisors are present, or the teacher who dips into her own paycheck to buy supplies for struggling students. These aren't just acts of kindness, they're declarations of defiance against a transactional world. So here's your challenge. Today, perform one act of invisible service. Then reflect on how it felt, not just for the recipient, but for you. Notice the absence of that subtle itch for recognition, the lightness of giving without strings. That's the Stoic gift in its purest form, proof that the most enduring legacies aren't carved in stone, but etched into the unspoken memories of those we've uplifted. And in that silence, you'll discover a paradox. The less you seek credit, the more you truly own the act. Because when you give like the Stoics, you're not just changing someone else's day. You're rewiring your own soul to find joy in the giving itself, no echo needed. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into a masterclass on wisdom, had a radical suggestion for anyone seeking true confidence. If you want to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid. At first glance, that sounds counterintuitive. Shouldn't confidence mean standing firm in your convictions? But here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. Real strength isn't in clinging to opinions like life rafts, it's in holding them lightly enough to let go when truth demands it. That's where the reverse clause comes in, a simple but transformative habit of ending every strong opinion with 4 quietly powerful words, "But I may be wrong." Think of the last heated debate you witnessed, maybe online, maybe at a family gathering. Notice how quickly positions harden into fortresses, how voices rise not from certainty, but from the fear of being seen as uncertain. Now imagine injecting that same conversation with Epictetus's humility. The economy will crash next year, but I may be wrong. This policy is clearly misguided, but I may be wrong. Suddenly, the tone shifts. What was a battlefield becomes a laboratory, a space where ideas get tested rather than defended. This isn't about self-doubt, it's about intellectual honesty. The wisest people in any room aren't those barking the loudest, they're the ones comfortable saying, "I don't know yet. Science backs this ancient insight." Studies on cognitive humility, the ability to recognize the limits of one's knowledge, show it correlates strongly with openness to learning, better decision-making, even stronger relationships. It turns out people trust those who can admit fallibility far more than those who posture as infallible. Consider two doctors. One states your diagnosis with absolute certainty. The other says, "Based on these tests, it's likely X, but let's run one more check to rule out Y." Who would you trust with your care? The reverse clause isn't weakness, it's precision. Here's how to practice it today. Pick one opinion you've held firmly, maybe a political stance, a parenting philosophy, or even a take on a TV show's ending. First, articulate it aloud with conviction, then pause and add, "But I may be wrong." Notice the physical reaction, that slight exhale as your grip on the idea loosens. That's the sound of mental space opening for new evidence. Try it in a low-stakes conversation first, a chat about sports predictions or restaurant recommendations. The goal isn't to undermine your perspective, but to ground it in reality. Even Marcus Aurelius, ruling the Roman Empire, wrote nightly reminders questioning his own judgments. "If anyone can prove me wrong, I'll gladly change. I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." The magic of this practice isn't just in tempering your words, it's in rewiring your relationship with being wrong. Most of us treat errors like stains to scrub out. The Stoics saw them as signposts pointing toward growth. Think of a river carving a canyon. It's the water's willingness to adjust its path, not stubbornly plow through rock, that gives it unstoppable force. That's the kind of confidence the reverse clause builds, not the brittle kind that shatters at the first challenge, but the resilient kind that bends, adapts, and flows toward deeper understanding. So the next time you feel that familiar heat of certainty rising, try Epictetus's experiment. Add those 4 words. Watch what happens not just in the conversation, but in you. Because true confidence isn't about never being wrong. It's about never being afraid to admit it, and that's how real progress begins. Seneca once watched a wealthy merchant devour an entire tray of honey cakes in one sitting, not out of hunger, but because he could. Later, the philosopher would write, "The greatest wealth is a poverty of desires." That's the heart of the Temperance Test, a deliberate pause between wanting and having, not to punish yourself, but to prove that pleasure doesn't own you. Picture this, you're craving your favorite dessert, the aroma filling the kitchen. Instead of reaching for it immediately, you set a timer for 24 hours. The wait isn't about denial, it's about discovery. What happens in that space between desire and fulfillment? Do you obsess, rationalize, or find the craving fades like mist in sunlight? That's the Stoic laboratory in action, turning everyday temptations into experiments in self-command. Modern science reveals why this works. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's CEO, strengthens with repeated acts of delayed gratification. It's like muscle memory for willpower. Stanford's famous marshmallow test showed that children who resisted eating one treat now for 2 later consistently outperformed peers in academics, health, even relationships. The Stoics weren't just teaching restraint, they were hacking neuroplasticity centuries before MRI machines. Every time you postpone a pleasure, whether it's scrolling social media or buying that impulse purchase, you're not just saying no to the thing. You're saying yes to a stronger, more disciplined version of yourself. Try this today with something small but tempting. A midday snack, a streaming binge, even checking likes on a recent post. When the urge hits, note the physical sensations, the quickened pulse, the mental bargaining. Just one episode won't hurt. Then set a clear time frame. I'll revisit this tomorrow at 3 p.m. The goal isn't to white-knuckle through misery. It's to observe desire without being enslaved by it. Like a scientist watching bacteria in a petri dish, you're studying your own impulses under the microscope. Often, you'll find the anticipation was more intense than the pleasure itself, a revelation Seneca knew well when he wrote, "It's not that we have so little time, but that we waste so much of it on false hungers." History's most disciplined minds used variations of this test. Michelangelo would sketch for hours before allowing himself bread and water. Beethoven took morning walks, delaying composition until his mind was razor sharp. Even Warren Buffett still lives in the same modest house he bought decades ago, despite billions in wealth, not because he's cheap, but because he understands luxury untempered by restraint loses its luster. The common thread: they didn't abstain from joy, they elevated it by making it intentional rather than automatic. Here's the twist: temperance isn't about scarcity, it's about savoring. When you finally allow yourself that delayed pleasure, consume it with full presence. Taste the layers of flavor in the dessert you waited for. Feel the texture of the fabric you saved to buy. The Stoics called this Premeditatio Malorum, imagining something worse to appreciate what you have. But you're flipping the script. By introducing controlled delay, you're not fearing loss, you're amplifying gratitude. So start small. Pick one pleasure today, a latte, a video game, even a gossip session with a friend, and schedule it for tomorrow instead. Notice how the space between want and have becomes a classroom where you learn the most surprising lesson of all. You've always been freer than your cravings led you to believe. And that's the ultimate power of the Temperance Test. It doesn't just delay gratification. It reveals who you are when no impulse is pulling your strings. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned his own enslavement into a masterclass on inner freedom, had a blunt question for anyone paralyzed by fear. What's the worst that can happen? And if it did, could you bear it? That's the foundation of the fear hierarchy, a Stoic strategy that doesn't dismiss terror but disassembles it piece by piece. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain, staring up at a sheer cliff face. Your goal isn't to leap to the summit in one impossible bound, but to carve a zigzagging path, one manageable switchback at a time. That's how courage is built, not by denying fear, but by ranking it and then confronting it in ascending order of difficulty. Take public speaking, a fear that outranks death for many. The Stoic approach wouldn't thrust you onto a TED Talk stage unprepared. Instead, you'd start by simply recording yourself speaking alone in your room. Then perhaps playing it back for a trusted friend. Next, a small group meeting. Each step stretches your comfort zone without snapping it. Modern exposure therapy confirms this ancient wisdom. Systematic desensitization works because it rewires the amygdala's panic response through gradual, controlled exposure. The key is progression. What feels impossible today becomes tomorrow's warm-up. But here's where most people get stuck. They mistake the hierarchy's order, tackling fears out of sequence. Someone terrified of rejection might impulsively confess unrequited love before practicing smaller social risks like striking up conversations with strangers at a coffee shop. Epictetus saw this coming. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you'll go on well. Translation: meet fear where you are, not where you think you should be. Try this today. List 5 fears holding you back from trivial, sending back a wrong order at a restaurant, to significant, asking for a raise. Now, arrange them like rungs on a ladder. Your mission this week: climb just one rung. If you dread conflict, start by politely correcting a minor overcharge on your bill. If you fear failure, submit a project draft knowing it's imperfect. Notice what happens when you survive that first small encounter. The monster under the bed shrinks to mouse size when you shine a light on it. History's bravest figures used variations of this method. Eleanor Roosevelt, who championed human rights despite crippling social anxiety, began by forcing herself to attend one gathering a week. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld conquered stage fright by performing at tiny, low-pressure clubs night after night. The pattern is universal. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the habit of acting alongside it. So here's your Stoic challenge. Pick one fear from the bottom of your hierarchy, something that makes your pulse quicken but won't destroy you. This week, walk straight toward it, not with bravado but with curiosity. Epictetus promised, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. That first step isn't just about conquering a fear, it's about discovering that you're far more capable than your anxieties have led you to believe. And that's how you turn a life of what-ifs into one of what's next. Imagine your mind as a ship constantly battered by waves, emails like unrelenting tides, social media a riptide of opinions, the daily grind an endless squall. Even the sturdiest vessel needs to dock for repairs. That's the essence of the Stoic Sabbath, not a religious retreat, but a deliberate strategic withdrawal to inspect your hull, patch leaks, and reset your course. Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire in perpetual crisis, still carved out moments to retire into yourself, as he wrote in Meditations, his secret. Recognizing that no amount of external conquest could compensate for inner disrepair, this isn't about lazy Sundays or digital detoxes, though those help. A true Stoic Sabbath is a quarterly self-audit, a full day where you step off life's treadmill to ask the uncomfortable questions most avoid. Am I living by my values or just reacting to demands? Have my goals shifted or am I clinging to old maps? Think of it like a CEO's quarterly review, except the company is your life and the stakes aren't profits but purpose. The ancient Stoics called this anachoresis, a temporary withdrawal not to escape reality, but to engage with it more clearly. Here's how to structure yours. First, isolate the day. Block it in your calendar like a medical procedure, non-negotiable. Go somewhere that disrupts your routines, a cabin, a library, even a different cafe. Physical distance from your usual environment jolts the mind awake. Next, divide the day into 3 acts. Morning is for looking back, journaling on the past quarter's highs, lows, and patterns. Marcus Aurelius modeled this. You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Simply observe. Did you compromise integrity for convenience? Did comfort crowd out growth? No judgment, just data. Afternoon shifts to looking inward. This is where most self-reflection fails. It stays vague. Drill deeper with Stoic prompts. What's one fear that's been whispering lies to me? Where did I confuse motion for progress? Write letters to your future self outlining lessons learned. If this feels daunting, borrow Seneca's method. He'd review his day with 3 questions. What did I do well? Where did I act against my values? What's one step toward improvement? Scale this up to 3 months. As evening falls, look ahead. Plot the next quarter's priorities, not as a to-do list, but as a to-be list. Instead of lose 10 pounds, try treat my body as an ally, not an obstacle. Instead of get a promotion, reframe, master skills that make me indispensable. The Stoics' new intentions outlast circumstances. Finally, cap the night with a symbolic release. Burn a page of old grievances. Toss a stone into a river representing shed burdens. or simply stand under the stars to remember your smallness and significance. The magic of this practice, it transforms time from something that happens to you into something you curate. Modern life amputates us from reflection. We're rewarded for doing, not discerning. But as Marcus wrote, nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Your Stoic Sabbath isn't a luxury, it's the maintenance required to keep your inner compass true. So when the world screams, keep going, sometimes the wisest reply is a deliberate pause, because you can't read the map while sprinting, and the direction you choose next matters far more than the speed you're running now. Epictetus once observed that it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. That piercing insight cuts to the heart of the ego audit, a Stoic practice designed to expose the subtle ways pride masquerades as wisdom, insecurity disguises itself as strength, and vanity whispers that we're the exception to life's rules. Imagine your ego as a silent partner in every decision, nudging you toward choices that protect your self-image rather than serve your growth. The audit isn't about self-flagellation, it's about illumination. Like a detective reviewing security footage, you're scanning your day for moments when ego hijacked the wheel. Start with the petty stuff. That time you doubled down in an argument long after realizing you were wrong, not because truth mattered, but because admitting error felt like surrender. Or when you name-dropped an accomplishment in conversation, not to inform, but to impress. Even something as trivial as refusing to ask for directions stems from the same root, the unbearable weight of appearing less than perfectly competent. The Stoics saw this clearly. Pride isn't just about bragging. It's the invisible armor we wear to avoid the vulnerability of being human. Now dig deeper. Recall a recent failure or criticism. Did you deflect blame onto external factors? The project failed because the team didn't support me, rather than I didn't communicate the vision clearly. That's ego in its most insidious form, rewriting reality to preserve your self-concept as someone who never truly falters. Epictetus warned his students, if you want to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid. Why? Because the moment you prioritize looking capable over becoming capable, you've handed your growth over to the applause of strangers. Here's how to conduct the audit. Tonight, replay 3 interactions from your day: a conversation, a decision, a reaction. For each, ask, did I act from principle or pride? That meeting where you dismissed a junior colleague's idea, was it genuinely unworkable or did it threaten your expertise? The social media post you crafted, was it meant to add value or to curate an image? Be brutally honest. The goal isn't to judge yourself, but to spot the patterns. Ego is like a skilled magician. It thrives on misdirection. You might think you're chasing success when really you're fleeing the specter of irrelevance. History's most grounded leaders mastered this discernment. George Washington famously submitted his battlefield strategies to Congress for critique, a radical act of humility for a military leader. Marie Curie, despite 2 Nobel Prizes, refused patents for her discoveries, insisting science belonged to humanity. These weren't saints, they were practitioners of ego hygiene. They understood what the Stoics taught. Pride doesn't just distort your view of others, it clouds your vision of yourself. Try this reframe. View every ego flare-up as a cost-benefit analysis. That stubborn insistence on doing things your way, how many hours did it waste? That need to have the last word, what relationships did it strain? Contrast that with the lightness of simply saying, I don't know, or you're right. There's a paradoxical power in stepping off the pedestal you've built for yourself. Like a tree shedding dead branches, you don't become weaker, you grow more resilient. So tonight, when you lay your head down, add one question to your Stoic review. Where did my ego speak louder than my ethics today? The answers might sting, but they're also your roadmap. Because the greatest barrier to unshakable confidence isn't failure, it's the armor you wear to avoid being seen failing. And the moment you dare to take it off, you'll find the air outside is far easier to breathe. Seneca wore a simple signet ring, not for vanity, but as a tactile reminder of his philosophy. Every time he pressed it into wax to seal a letter, the cool metal against his skin whispered, "Stay steady." That's the power of an equanimity anchor, a physical object that tethers you to calm when emotions threaten to sweep you away. In one of his letters, he wrote, "Consistency is the foundation of virtue." What's the good of a philosophy that melts under the first touch of heat? Your anchor isn't just a trinket, it's a rebellion against the chaos of the moment, a way to train your nervous system to pause before reacting. Think of how a sailor ties a rope to a cleat during a storm. That one secure point keeps the entire vessel from drifting. Your anchor serves the same purpose. It could be a ring like Seneca's, a smooth stone in your pocket, or even the texture of your watch band. The key is intentionality. Choose something you interact with often, so it becomes a subconscious trigger for presence. A lawyer might use the weight of her pen before signing a contract. A parent might touch the worn edge of a child's drawing folded in their wallet before responding to a tantrum. These aren't magical talismans, they're psychological speed bumps, slowing the rush from trigger to reaction. Here's how to activate yours. First, pick an object with quiet significance, something that won't draw attention but feels personal. A vintage coin, a bracelet with a mantra engraved inside, or even your phone's lock screen set to a calming image like waves or mountains. Next, assign it a meaning. Every time you touch it, let it cue a breath and a question. What would my calmest self do here? The goal isn't to suppress emotion, it's to create a half-second delay where choice lives. Modern research calls this cognitive reappraisal, but the Stoics were doing it centuries ago, inserting space between stimulus and response where wisdom grows. Consider the surgeon who pauses to feel the weight of her stethoscope before delivering difficult news, or the teacher who straightens his tie before addressing a disruptive class. These tiny rituals aren't about the objects themselves, they're about ritualizing composure. Seneca's ring didn't make him wise, it reminded him to access the wisdom he'd already cultivated. That's the anchor's secret function. It doesn't give you patience or clarity, it recalls you to them. So today, choose your anchor. Test it in low-stakes moments, traffic jams, long lines before deploying it in crises. Notice how the simple act of touching it begins to rewire your reflexes over time, because equanimity isn't the absence of storms, it's knowing you carry your own calm always. And sometimes all it takes is the weight of a ring on your finger to remember. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who shaped Epictetus, left us a challenge that still echoes across centuries. If you devote yourself to study, you will avoid boredom in life, you will not long for the theater, and you will be untroubled by sleepless nights or painful regrets. Notice what he's not saying. He doesn't promise wealth, fame, or even mastery. The reward of lifelong learning isn't a destination, it's the quality of the journey itself. Picture two paths, one where skills plateau at good enough, and another where curiosity burns like an undying flame. The first leads to stagnation, the slow erosion of purpose that comes when the mind isn't stretched. The second, that's the mastery path, where every skill you cultivate becomes a thread in the tapestry of your character. Consider the carpenter who learns woodworking not just to build tables, but to practice patience with each measured cut. Or the programmer who studies ethics alongside code, ensuring their creations serve rather than exploit. This is what sets Stoic learning apart. It's never just about technical proficiency. Every new skill is a chance to hone virtues like discipline, focus, and resilience. When Musonius taught philosophy, he insisted students dig literal gardens to reinforce that wisdom grows through both study and sweat. The lesson, true education shapes hands as much as minds. Here's how to walk this path today. First, audit your current skills through a Stoic lens. Are they merely transactional ways to earn income or pass time? Or do they stretch you ethically? If you're a writer, for example, are you chasing algorithms or crafting truth with courage? Next, choose one new discipline that aligns with your values. Always admired musicians, learn the violin, but frame practice as a meditation in perseverance rather than performance. Fascinated by languages, study Mandarin, but do it to bridge cultures, not just check a resume box. The key is intentionality, tying each lesson to a virtue you wish to embody. History's polymaths understood this synergy. Leonardo da Vinci didn't just paint the Mona Lisa. He studied anatomy to render human emotion with precision, botany to perfect landscapes, and optics to play with light. Each skill fed his deepest virtue, relentless curiosity. Benjamin Franklin's famous self-improvement chart didn't track wealth or accolades. It measured humility, sincerity, and temperance. Even modern examples like Nelson Mandela, who studied law not just to practice it, but to dismantle injustice with its tools, prove Musonius right. Education's highest purpose is ethical transformation. Now, the critical twist: mastery in Stoicism isn't about perfection. It's about direction. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, became a legendary teacher not because he knew everything, but because he remained a work in progress until his last breath. That's the heart of the mastery path, showing up daily, not for trophies or praise, but for the quiet satisfaction of knowing you're sculpting a self no external force can break. So pick up that textbook, enroll in that workshop, or dust off that instrument, but do it with a Stoic's question in mind. How will this skill not just change what I do, but who I become? The answer will determine whether you're merely collecting hobbies or forging an unshakable character, one lesson at a time. After exploring 48 Stoic methods to build unshakable confidence, they all distill into 3 timeless pillars: control, perspective, and action. Control isn't about commanding the world, it's about mastering your responses. Perspective isn't just seeing differently, it's re-seeing until obstacles reveal their hidden edges. And action, it's the bridge between wisdom and results, where boldness meets virtue. These aren't abstract ideas, they're muscles waiting to be flexed. Because confidence isn't something you find, it's something you forge through daily practice, like a blacksmith tempering steel. Think of it like learning a language. You could memorize every grammar rule, but fluency only comes when you start speaking haltingly at first, then with growing assurance. The Stoics knew this intimately. Marcus Aurelius didn't journal about courage from the safety of a palace. He wrote by torchlight in war camps, his words tested by barbarian invasions and political betrayals. His meditations weren't poetry, they were battle drills for the mind. That's the heart of Stoicism, philosophy that doesn't just sound good, but works when life turns sharp. So where do you begin? Not with all 48 methods at once, but with one, just one. Maybe it's the morning virtue ritual, asking, what would my best self do today? Before your feet hit the floor, or perhaps the Premeditation of Evils, where you rehearse setbacks before they arrive, stripping fear of its surprise. It could be as simple as the Stoic pause, breathing through a reaction until your wiser self takes the wheel. The method doesn't matter as much as the doing. Marcus Aurelius left us a challenge that cuts through 20 centuries of noise. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Notice the urgency. Not consider, not debate, but be. Confidence isn't a theory to discuss, it's a life to live. So pick your starting point. test it, refine it, then return for another tool and another, until Stoicism isn't just something you study, but something you are. And if this resonated with you, join us as we keep unearthing ancient wisdom for modern storms. The next step, yours.